some comments, and is your colleague from the attorney's office who work on this with you, or anybody?
He is not, but.
Is there anybody from your office who might comment?
I'm here.
Okay, all right. Didn't know how familiar you are with it. All right.
I am.
Come on up, Amy.
Good afternoon. The contract is through the end of my term, the current term, with Quality Correctional Care out of Indiana. They have 70 plus of the 90 jails in Indiana. And the people that I've spoken with, they have an amazing reputation. So, do you have any questions about the contract or any of the items in the contract?
Before we get to questions, any other comments you'd like to make, Steve?
It's approved as to form and legality.
Okay. And
are we part of the whole LLC or with Indiana? Are we a standalone because we're in Kentucky?
We'll be separate in Kentucky.
That is one concern that we had raised. It did look as if they were, creating a new LLC for their operations in Kentucky, and that is not uncommon for companies to do as they move into different states. We would prefer to have had a contract with the Quality of Indiana LLC. However, that's the way they were doing it. We brought that to the jailer's attention and identified that is a point of risk there. Nevertheless, she felt that this was still the best situation for the jail.
Thank you.
Steve, are they a Kentucky Corp?
It's a Kentucky LLC.
Okay.
But all their operations out of Indiana are done through an Indiana LLC. So they created a new one for their use in Kentucky, it appears.
They would have to register to do business here if they didn't, or otherwise.
Correct.
They did. Okay.
and they are set to begin, if this is approved, they're set to begin May 1?
No, May the 6th.
May 6th, okay. And do they seem prepared to do that?
They're ready. Just
Okay.
like throwing the way down. They've got their staff positions filled and they're ready to go.
Okay. Any other questions? We will read the resolution.
Resolution authorizing Henderson County Jailer to execute agreement with Quality Correctional Care of Kentucky LLC for jail health care services. Whereas the Henderson County Jailer has reviewed proposals for the provision of professional health care services at the Henderson County Detention Center. And whereas after research and meeting with various providers, the jailer has identified and hereby recommends the services of Quality Correctional Care of Kentucky LLC for the provision of inmate health services, healthcare services at the detention center, and whereas the Henderson County Fiscal Court approves the recommendation of the Henderson County Jailer that the attached agreement be approved. Now therefore be it resolved that the Henderson County Fiscal Court hereby authorizes Jailer Amy Brady to bind the county to the terms of the attached agreement with the Quality Correctional Care of Kentucky LLC for inmate health care services and direct her to execute said agreement on behalf of the county along with any and all other necessary and appropriate documents required to effectuate the intent thereof.
Motion to approve?
So move.
Second, okay. We're all going to get back in the groove. We have a motion by Master Tubman, second by Master Southard. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thanks.
Get it rocking. Okay. Come to that fun time of the year when we try to hammer out a draft budget for the following fiscal year. And let me go over a little bit about how we're going to work this today. You should have 3 documents in front of you that we're handing out. I handed out today. One is an overview, a PowerPoint. Looks like that. It will be up on the screen as well as I go over it. There should be a hard copy of the 22 draft budget. Looks like that. This one. And then this is the current year budget up to this morning. If you want to do some comparisons as we go. As we, after the overview, we'll begin to review revenue line items, and we may call up each department head to answer questions about those revenue line items. When we get done going through revenue, we'll go back at the top and start with appropriations. And again, each department head will be asked to come up and go over those with us and perhaps answer questions. And I think the spirit here is a team effort. Normally, we'd be around a big table in the middle of the courtroom here to truly make it feel like a group huddle, hammering this out together. But because of COVID, we're doing it this way. So, but I don't want to lose that feeling of working together to make this right, as good as we can make it. So I'm going to start off with an overview, and I think I have a clicker here. Make sure I get this right. It's working. Okay. It's my responsibility as judge to prepare a draft budget for the fiscal court to consider, and after consulting with each of the department heads and elected officials, tried to work one here that was both responsible and met needs. That first bullet point was kind of one of the guiding factors in my calculations, is to give officials and department heads the resources to increase salaries using their discretion and make key capital investments. I worked with each of the department heads to, number one, gauge their desires for pay increases, as well as anything they may be buying new this year, and try to work out kind of a set amount for each of their departments so that we could fix our costs and know how much to work with there, but then they'd also have know how much they had to work with on their end. And I think it went really well. We did want to make sure that we maintain or increase spending on the vital services we provide, while at the same time making sure that we kept the discipline that we've shown the last 5 years that have put us in so much better financial shape as a county, and utilizing corresponding cuts or savings in the general fund to counterbalance as best we could any spending we were going to anticipate. One of the ways we do that, have done it in the past, and we're going to do it this year, is to budget revenue conservatively, especially on the general fund side. And if we do create potential surplus, which we've done consistently in the last 5 years, to maybe consider using some of that over the next couple years as a reserve to deal with potential looming pension increases that right now, by the estimations of most folks in Frankfurt, will last to at least 2028 before they begin to level off. And we are back on a schedule of adding about 12% a year to our pension costs. So it is definitely something to take into consideration as we work through this budget and future budgets. Here's some highlights in the draft that I'm going to present. On the general fund side, which supports both the general fund, the road department, LGEA, sorry, I left out a letter there, and economic development, we're actually anticipating a reduction of $289,018 year over year in the total, even as we are going to increase salaries and pensions in my draft. And you can see some of the expenditure decreases there in the general fund, LGEA. Meanwhile, adding revenue and resources to the road department, which I know is important to us all. And the jail expenditures will increase fairly significantly, but that has a lot to do with the medical contract that was just approved. It is one of the pricier items that Amy deals with every year, and it's only going up. But I'm glad to say that what I'm about to present to you is actually going to save the general fund money. On the revenue side, I think you'll see that the general fund revenues, there we go, increased by only $487. So we're not jacking up the general fund revenues in order to fund any of these increases. Staying very close to the line on general fund revenue estimates. Road fund revenues are going to increase, and a lot of that is coming from rural and municipal aid guidance that our contribution from them is going to go up. LGEA funds, that's local government economic assistance funds, are going to decrease by $248,000. That's mostly significant decrease in mineral tax revenues, which I'll talk about in a moment. Due to COVID, on many different levels, the jail revenue is going to be projected to decrease by $2.1 million, and I know that something that Jailer Brady's been dealing with all this year, and it will likely continue into next year. And we'll be talking about ways we can deal with that. It is my anticipation in this budget that we will not change health insurance premiums. With 2 months to go in this fiscal year, we are right on target with our projected claims and revenues with our health insurance. In fact, hopefully, knock on wood, we're going to finish just a hair in the black, a couple, maybe $10,000, $20,000 in the black, which we can put back towards the escrow fund that we have to cover any future hard hits in our health insurance plan. We are self-funded health insurance plan, so we fund the premiums and we also fund the claims. So far this year, we've done well, and I am going to propose that we do not change those premiums next year. Okay, here are the department budgets. This is their entire budget in each department, and the difference in increase for each one. And you'll notice the asterisk by my department, and you'll see down below that it includes the judge's staff, treasurer's office, maintenance department, emergency management, codes, Brent Jacobs in IT, and our occupational tax office. And you can see the differences there. And again, this is their entirety, all their line items added together. So it's a healthy increase, and this will be a combination of salaries, pensions, and other things that they indicated they needed. But there will also be things in their budgets that they cut to help counterbalance this a bit. Give you a chance to review those some more if you want. Any questions so far? We're going to go into this in depth here in a moment. This is just an overview. Now, of those in each budget, I broke out the salary, the increases in the salaries, the increases in the pensions by those same departments. And again, in each department, I think there were some cuts made to help counterbalance this, and we'll go over each of them. So, one of the things we wanted to do after a year of COVID, and we tamped down, tried to keep down salaries with a kind of a flat 2%, because we didn't know what was going to happen with our revenues with COVID. I felt like this year, especially because we're coming into the end of this fiscal year without really suffering much economic damage to our budget from COVID. In fact, I think it's going to be a fairly normal year for tax revenues. I wanted, in talking to all the department heads as well, they wanted to catch our people up, get them back on schedule for the salaries that we feel they deserve and maybe had to take a back seat with for a year with COVID. So this, in my mind, it was a catch-up year. This will be a catch-up year. Does everybody understand that? Each of those numbers for salaries is the increase year over year in salaries, or the increase year over year in pensions. And then the total is in the last column, total of those two. Key reductions. Some of this is the result of our money management and also some of the services we've been able to negotiate, as well as some reductions based on recent history, and that we were budgeting maybe a little too much for each year. The 911 debt service, that annual payment that we made on the 911 bond, we completely defeased, so it is out of the budget. We saved $284,000. The ambulance service, which we just signed a contract with, that goes from being a kind of a variable expense of last year we budgeted $104,000 and change, down to a fixed $65,000 a year, which is, I think, both a savings and much easier to budget when you have a fixed expense. So my calculation, those two bits of savings covered just about every increase in salaries and pensions for the general fund departments anyway. There were two other things in LGEA. You remember that we joined the city in shifting the 911 fees from landline telephones to the water bills in order to more accurately reflect everybody who should have been contributing to 911 but wasn't because they cut their landline, and making it more equitable. That has worked. Our subsidy of 911 is going to be greatly reduced this year and in future years, so we were able to reduce that line item expense from $200,000 to $125,000. So that's good news. And our landfill and solid waste expenses have averaged less than $125,000 over the last few years, so we kind of right-sized that expense in our budget. Some revenue notes. In this budget, total non-jail revenues, general fund, road, LGEA, are budgeted at $15,008,368. You can read that. Very much in line with the current year's budget. The actual non-jail revenues we've averaged since 2018 are over $17 million. And again, we're holding the line this year on both estimated revenue and our costs, really. And so if we continue to have this kind of performance, where we have significant surpluses over the next couple of years, we can use that, in my mind, we can use that money and save it for the days in 26, 27, year 2028, when pension increases might really become a factor. And that reserve fund we can use to balance our budget while we figure out what we're going to do next, learn how to deal with that. It's just a thought, but I still think it shows that this is a conservative budget, even as we balance it against what we've averaged in revenue the last, since 2018. So I think we're setting ourselves up for a good year again, if we can maintain that kind of revenue and that kind of fiscal discipline. As you probably have come to understand, property values are still going up. They're increasing by 3.3%, according to PVA's annual report to us. So that's a good thing. You know, it should indicate that we continue to get property tax revenues that increase year over year. In the revenue side, I bumped up both occupational tax revenue by $100,000 and insurance premium tax estimate, bumped that up by $100,000 based on what we've been bringing in since we started. It's actually done much better than that, but I thought I'd more accurately come close to accurately reflecting what we're getting from those revenue line items in this budget. Also, our county clerk pooling fees were bumped up by $20,000, but it will actually be much more than that. It's exceeded that already. But again, tangible property and mineral tax revenues will drop by a considerable amount, and the mineral tax drop is mainly related to a significant decrease in the amount of oil being pumped here in Henderson County. Brenda and I had a phone call about that with Revenue Cabinet, and their estimates for our mineral tax are dropping because they showed us how much of a reduction in royalties from oil production have dropped here. It's significant. It's interesting. Finally, pension notes, something that's on everybody's mind. 3 years ago, we enlisted the Compass Group, who does a lot of financial work for us, to do a projection out through 2028, which is again the year that both state government officials and observers think that the ever-increasing pension costs will begin to level out at the state level. We asked them to do this through 2028. Note a couple things that they reported in that analysis. They estimated by 2022 that our general fund and road fund pension costs would be $1.482 million. They are slightly below that, so we're a little ahead of the game to begin with. But by 2028, according to their estimations based on the information they had on hand at the time, our general fund and road fund pension costs will increase to $3.1 million, and that's factored in with a 1% cost of living increase every year for our team members. So going from 1.482 million up to 3.105 million in the space of 6 years is significant. We're going to have to deal with that, as is every other municipality in Kentucky. The jail's 2021 budgeted pension costs, $937,000. Compass Group estimated theirs at $2.4 million and change. So again, it's going to be an increase for them. That's at full employment, Amy. That's with a full roster. We know that wavers, that varies. But I just wanted to throw those out there to illustrate that, that's going to be a challenge in the next 6 years. It could end up being better than we hope. I asked Compass Group to be very conservative, kind of worst case scenario for us, and that's what they did. There are many things that can impact this over the next 6 years. But I'd like us to prepare for what would be most expensive for us. That's contemplated in this budget. Okay. Any questions again before we dive on in?
I have a question about the mineral tax they was talking. Are they basing that off of what we took in last year?
Yeah. If you take a quick look at this, it's interesting. Tim, on the current financial summary, the one as of this morning, I'll try to find this for you. On page 5 of 9. See what our budget was? 363,
Yes.
and what we taken in? 90,000. Now we may get another payment in the last 2 months, maybe, but that is how far that's dropped. In the year before, it was much closer to 363,000. So, and again, they attributed that almost all of it to oil reduction in oil production.
So if that increases, if oil production increases, that number will increase?
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing a lot more activity in the oil fields than I was
Yeah,
6 months ago.
I showed some of the overview, or most of the overview, to the Finance Committee on Monday, and that was brought up by Master McCollum that, price per barrel's going up, so that may foster more production.
Yes.
We'll see.
Well, actually went into a negative at one point last year.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
it's-
So, yeah, fingers crossed on that, but we can't count on it, right? So,
Right.
I like your approach, especially looking at what Compass Group has done. Now, you had Compass Group showing, if I remember that document that you had showing
Yeah.
our income and showing how it was starting to go down. And I
Or
forgot-
flatten out, maybe
It
flatten out.
flattened out some.
Yeah.
Do you know where we stand on that? It'd be interesting to have.
On that graph timeline?
Yeah.
Just at the beginning. I mean,
Okay.
they were maybe 2 years in.
Okay, I can maybe look at that. Now, they had put in the 1% COLA
Mhm.
for the retirement, and we're looking at.
Well, for the pay, I think it was contemplating 1% increases in salaries
And
and
we're-
then corresponding.
We're going up 7% for the clerks and 9.17 for the
This year.
sheriff.
This year.
So that's going to boost those numbers up even higher. if I'm-
Perhaps, but again, we're starting at a little bit lower base than they had predicted.
But I think you're correct.
1.482.
We've got to prepare for that.
Right.
Hitting us in the.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're going to go to revenue. We're going to go to the draft revenue. It should be in the front page of your packet. And a lot of this revenue won't require input from any of the department heads, but it might. So if you go to page 1 there, right on the front, I'm going to walk down what I was thinking when I penciled in the numbers for these general fund revenue line items. And on the side, you can see some notes I put in to kind of describe the difference or what I was thinking. I've been doing this 5 years now, and it's become fascinating to me. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, and it can be a lot of fun. It can be very frustrating. But I think I've gotten pretty decent at looking at trends and try to anticipate, and we've done a really good job of hitting the marks the last couple of years, so I didn't want to screw that up. So right off the bat, I want to tell you that I wanted to keep our revenue estimate conservative. Again, just within a few $100 of last year. A couple things, too, is there are a couple items that tend to skew our revenue line items, and that's bonds and grants, because they're flow-through items that tend to be, pretty hefty amounts. They're really not an expense to us. We don't spend the money unless we get it in from the grant. So I tried to scrub that out when talking apples to apples here, so that didn't, throw anybody off. Does that make sense? For instance, in our expense side on general fund, 1.66 million was in there for the 911 bond, which we defeased. So there was 1.66 million coming out this year, and I would have looked like a genius if I'd have said, we're going to save $1.66 million this year thanks to my intelligence, and that's absolutely false. We paid it off, and the money in, money out is going away. So I tried to not think about those bonds as I was going through this budget, bonds and grants. I hope everybody understands that. Is that cool? Okay. So as you see, wherever there is a difference in those line items, you'll see a note. Another thing to note halfway down, industrial bonds. Again, that's kind of money in and money out. We paid off, or 2 IRBs were closed out this year, so that number is reduced, both in revenue and expense, though. I had mentioned adding a little bit of expected revenue to things like county clerk pooling, insurance premium tax, occupational tax. Our net profits are staying the same, but they're way ahead of schedule this year as well. And you can go on to page 2. And we also upped the interest line item because of Charlie, we have so much, as you well know, we have enough in reserve that our interest income's been really good lately. Always a good problem to have. Any questions as you look at that from the fiscal court members? Again, very slight changes.
Is the motor vehicle a little too high? We're only at 65% of that number right now.
It's variable, and Renisa, would you like to speak to that? We have good years and bad years with that.
We generally, what we do for the state budget, whenever we do that at the beginning of the year, we just look at what we did previously the year before. That's our most recent data,
Right.
and we reproduce that. I mean, we really can't predict, so we just kind of go with the
That's what
previous year's data.
Right, as of April, we're 278, 419, and if that trend keeps going on, we're not going to hit the 425. We're going to be 390 or something like that.
Right.
So I didn't know if we should put it back at 390 just to
We
be
can-
more
we can-
realistic, or what?
Several of these, to be honest, line items are well under what we've been
I'm
trending
sure they
to.
are.
So,
Yeah.
Again, I tried to the overall thing was be conservative on the total.
Okay.
You know,
I don't have a real problem
yeah,
with that. Yeah, that's,
you know, if we were missing by half,
right.
it'd be concerning. But again, it depends on how many people buy cars in the next year.
Right.
And coming out of COVID, it may be a boom. I think I don't know. I don't want to miss it too.
We are
Too
very
far.
busy, I will say that.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, you may catch it up now that people are getting
We
out,
may.
too.
yeah.
They got their down payment money,
Yeah.
too.
Thank you. Thank you. Some of these are kind of moving targets, you know, from year to year. Tangible property is another one. A lot of that has to do with businesses, what they're doing. Any other line items in that general fund that anybody have any questions about? For people who've been at this a while, like Butch and Steve, a lot of these numbers are familiar, you know, not too much of a variation one way or the other. And we've done very well
I think
over
it
the
looks
last few
good.
years. Okay to move on? Okay, road fund. Here's a good example of how grants and bonds impact budgets. We had almost $1 million, well, $830,000 in our budget this year because of Ohio Drive reimbursements and grants. Of course, that's all coming out except for a little bit of money that's going to spill over perhaps into next fiscal year from our federal grant. You see that $98,000 I label as this kind of a spillover. So, the revenues for the road fund are going down, but primarily just because of that grant. The annual revenue that we expect to be consistent is actually, I think, going up a little bit. As you see, the county road aid projected to be higher this year, which is terrific. There's always a threat that it will drop again. And there are things like culvert sales and other sales that vary year to year with the road department. Some years they sell a heck of a lot more culverts than others, and try to kind of average it out a bit. Is Bill Hubiak in the room today? Okay, gotcha. Thanks, Bill. Is that accurate to say, as I described it? Things like culvert sales and other sales, which kind of are catch-all, they can vary year to year, just never know.
Last month, we increased quite a bit on culverts.
Yeah. It's variable, but
Yes.
yeah.
How much, do you have an idea, Kurt, how much we,
Yeah. I was trying to. Just remember, if you're going to answer questions, and I know I called on Bill, kind of got to come up to the mic, but sorry about that, Bill. As an example, we've sold $40,000 in culverts this year, which I know is really exciting to everybody watching at home, but revenue's revenue. The other line items in Bill's revenue budget kind of staying consistent. Any questions about that?
I don't have any questions, but Bill me and him rode my roads the other day, and I know I'm not the only one that has this problem, but every blacktop road I've got is in bad shape. And it's nice that we got an extra $200,000 here that put in the road fund. That's not going to touch our problem, and our problem's going to get much, much worse if we don't start addressing it.
Yeah, well, remember that we subsidize the road fund, so he doesn't operate just on the revenue on this, in this group of revenue line items. We give him a lot more. His budget's over $5 million, or almost $5 million. So, and we'll be looking at that in a second.
Okay, because
Yeah.
we've got some serious problems in this county.
And it's going to take kind of incremental, can't catch them up all at once, but I know what you're saying.
Well, we're still trying to catch up from the years before Brad was even here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was.
Right, I understand, but if we're putting down 4 miles and going back 12, you see where?
Yeah, I got you.
That's what's
Yeah, oh, yeah.
happening.
We've been consistently adding money to the road budget over the last several years. But I get it, man. And, I'll say right off the bat that our new round of federal, stimulus coming to the county, we still haven't gotten exact guidance on what we can use it for other than a couple, 3 things that were noted, and there's more guidance coming down. And if infrastructure is one of the things that we can spend that on, I think we need to take advantage of that.
I agree.
And that's going to be a little over $8.8 million in 2 years, so. Any questions on the road revenue line items? Okay, we'll go to the jail, and Amy, I don't want to speak for you because you handle your own budgeting. I think it's obvious that the revenue you get from holding prisoners is going to drop because you got less prisoners to hold, but if you don't mind coming up to the mic, if you want to speak to any of these particular line items, go ahead. I know there are a couple that are going to drop precipitously because we just don't know what to expect from COVID. But
our transportation cabinet line item is going to go down. The state is just putting the KYTC crews back out, but they're still riding separately. The jail employee and the inmates can't be in the building with the KYTC employees. They can't be in a vehicle with the KYTC employees. They can't clean the inside of the vehicles that they ride in or anything like that. So this year, KYTC inmates won't be going out. The federal per diem, actually this entire budget I based on now, what's going on in the jail now. Our federal prisoner count is down slightly, but I had a phone call yesterday afternoon of one on the way down here looking to place 100 inmates. So if we can get the rest of the COVID out, then we'll be doing well.
Won't that stress your current staff, though?
It will. They've got a class of new hires right now training, and they extended the training hours during the day to
Is
try to
there
get them.
something we need to do about your new hires as far as the salaries and whatnot?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to talk about that. It's an important question, and we're going to talk about that later, so hold that thought.
Of course, DUI fees from the state, court costs, jail bond fees are down because the current status of COVID, and for the past year, state per diem, it's based on actual numbers now, along with the SAP per diem. Local corrections and the medical allotment and operating costs line items. We do not have those numbers from the state yet. They're late every year. So those are based on last year. Federal transports, we increased that because when I renewed the IGA and in the negotiation, in the past, we haven't got paid for mileage or guard service, and that is included now. So every transport they take to the other side of Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, then we'll get paid mileage for that. The reimbursement, you'll see a big jump there. I'll be transferring money from the commissary profit account to cover part of the SAP cost. And I cleared that with the state.
I'm probably getting ahead of myself again, but didn't you find somebody to help with the SAP program that had the credentials that
Yes.
we could get approved? Do we need to do anything about that person and their salary and that kind of stuff?
He's approved, and he is in the line item, and actually I talked to the judge the other
Okay.
day, and just will benefit on the county side
Okay, just want to make sure we had it
Yeah.
covered.
all the way around
Yeah.
for that one.
Okay. Because that could end up helping us raise the SAP money and get that back.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's-
Yes.
It's actually going to be an even better deal than you imagined,
Yeah.
because he's coming in as a part-timer.
24 hours a week.
Yeah,
Okay.
no retirement.
Excellent.
business,
Excellent.
yeah.
Do y'all have any questions?
A couple things to point out. We have significant reductions in federal prison per diem and state per diem. And that's just the fact of life here with this. We just got to deal with that. A couple, points of hope. We can use our federal stimulus. And one of the things they did say right off the bat is we can use it to replace money in our revenue line items that we lost specifically due to COVID. And the one department in the county where that has been the case has been the jail. So I've made Amy, the kind of pinky swear that we would make her whole this year, make sure she didn't have to dive into her reserve to make this year work, that we would be able to cover that. And we can do it again next year if necessary with that money, if we decide to. So as we wade through this COVID challenge for prisons, there is some safety net there. So if you notice, in prior year carryover, on the right-hand side, you see $3,338,999. That is what Amy has to put here coming out of her reserve to balance against her proposed expenses, which is a lot of money. But we're going to talk about that. That's a little deceiving, and we'll talk about it some more. But I just wanted you to make aware, to make this balance, she had to do that. It won't be as bad as that. And we will be able to cover that if we choose. So am I characterizing that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Jailer Brady? Okay, excellent. Any other questions of Amy?
The Senate Bill 556 that went through, that's going to help us out. I did not include those numbers in my budget.
That bill raised the per diem rates.
It did,
Yeah,
and
state.
it's retroactive to March of last year. And it's an additional $2 per state inmate.
That might be a windfall, but it's after July 1, right?
It is after July
Yeah.
1. Also, the jail will be receiving a per diem increase for every program that we have that an inmate completes and every day that the inmate attends the program. And our SAP program, the credit that the inmates earn, if they are in a program and they earn 90 days credit, then there is a set dollar amount that goes back to the jail for every inmate that earns that credit. And with one of the largest SAP programs outside of a prison, it's very beneficial.
Yeah, we could do a lot better because that's good news. Any other questions of Amy on the revenue side? Okay, thank you. Turn to page 5, that's LGEA revenue, and that's kind of a little batch of odds and ends. Couple points of interest. We help subsidize Holy Name kids who use the public school buses to get to school. We're reimbursed that amount by the state. But fewer and fewer Holy Name kids are using the bus. And our payout in that line item over the last couple of years has continued to drop. And in COVID, I know very few are using the bus. So that might remain a very low figure for some time. Don't know exactly why. It's other than COVID, of course, but that was even happening before COVID hit. So interesting. And the way that works is we get a bill from the school system, the public school system, at the end of every year telling us how many kids they dropped off at Holy Name. They use a state formula to tell us how much that cost, and we pay that. It's averaged about 30 to 35,000 in the previous, 8 to 10 years, but it has dropped precipitously lately. And there's the mineral tax, Maastricht Southern, reflected in that drop in revenue. Hopefully, it'll be much better than that.
Brad, isn't Riverview starting to mine our direction?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Okay. I was hoping they were starting from their Uniontown portal coming our way.
There,
and
well, maybe not.
we would start getting a little of that.
Okay, the next two revenue pages, state grants. Again, that's kind of money in, money out. We got with Nancy Watkins at the Road Department to see what grants she plans on utilizing. Again, almost all these are hers in various respects. You see the Warm Center grant there. Again, that's money in, money out. That's not money out of our pocket. So we put that there, but it really doesn't impact the bottom line a whole lot or at all. One thing we did not put in here, and I'd be interested in hearing some discussion about this from Fiscal Court, we also have a federal grants fund. And other than the COVID relief, the ARPA money, American Rescue Plan, that's coming down, we didn't have any anticipation of federal grants. We're about to get $4.4 million deposited into our account for this fiscal year. The second half would be 12 months from now. So we have the choice to go ahead and put a $4.4 million line item in federal grants, anticipating that, and it'll, of course, make the budget look a whole lot bigger than it actually is as far as our expense. But or we can leave it blank and just see what happens. I hate to anticipate without a doubt that we'll get that money, but and we don't have to have anything in that line item to take it in, we can still take it in when it hits a year from now. But I'll do what the court decides. If it helps, remind you that, oh, we've got that money coming in, I'll be happy to do it.
We don't really know where we can spend it. So I'd just as soon do what you're doing, is not putting it in, and we can always amend the budget later.
Yeah. We don't know what we can spend it on. We're pretty sure we're going to get it. We don't know what we can spend it on. And having having 4.4 million in federal grants, the only weird thing about that is it really jacks up the total budget, and it might confuse people.
And we don't want to spend the federal dollars and then end up with a building on Second and Water Street that you paid way too much for, and then you can't use it. And then-
Don't want to do that.
No.
Don't want to do
Well,
that.
there's a lot of guidelines on that, like policies,
Oh.
procedures.
It's-
There's a threshold, I believe, isn't it, Brenda?
Well, we gotta spend it in 3
It's a jump
years.
through hoops.
And you
Yeah.
don't spend it until you've got it approved. I mean,
That's right.
Just,
Health insurance revenue, we've left it at what we've had at 2.1. We never quite hit 2.1, but we also tend to finish in the black as well. So I just left that as is, 2.1. It's been 2.1 since I got here, I think, Brenda, and yeah, we've never exceeded that, either on the revenue side or the expense side. So you see the total revenue at the very bottom of that. Everybody sees where it says total all fund receipts. Of course, we're anticipating fewer revenues. Part of that is the jail, obviously. Everything else slightly about the same.
and you
So-
don't have the road that we've been spending so much money on. either.
Ohio Drive,
Yeah.
911,
Yeah.
that's all gone. So in total, we're dropping down again, but a lot of that's grant money, so don't let it throw you off too much. The bottom line is we're keeping the revenue just about the same, other than the jail. Any questions on revenue overall? Any questions from any of our guests? Okay. Now, the fun part, appropriations, expenses. Start on page 1 again if you flip it over. And you know what? Here we go. We're on the right page. Okay, a couple things. Again, I have notes on the side where something is different. I didn't put it beside every salary or pension increase because we all know those were different. But other than that, put notes out on the side to help. And what I did, again, with each department head and elected official, got with them, tried to gauge with them what they wanted to do for their teams as far as salaries went, and also things they thought they needed to spend money on this year, capital expenses, and built their budgets around that. In many cases, there weren't just increases, there were also cuts to either try to help their budgets or just to more accurately reflect what they've been spending. And we can go down line by line. One thing to remember, if you remember my overview, under the judge's expense, that incorporates several different departments. So what's your pleasure? You want me to go line by line here? Any questions? And we can start on page 1. The state adjustments. Constitutional officers, at least some of the constitutional officers, have their pay scale determined by the state. Myself, Amy, Steve, Ed Brady, Renice Abner, they're determined by the state. And they are, I don't know why this happens, Kentucky does this in a lot of ways, they're done by calendar year. So midway through the year, those salaries change. And all we can do is guess, because sometimes the state will keep them flat, sometimes they'll give a little 1% cost of living, I don't know, sometimes they're more. We never quite know what it's going to be, so we just try to predict a little bit in round figures and keep it conservative.
Part of that, Brad, is your number of years you've been the county judge.
And the others too.
And the others too.
Right.
Renice, and that kicks it up
Right.
because of the years. Steve's is based on a rubber dollar that they have to calculate what the cost of living was, and they did this,
Right.
was a lawsuit back in the 40s. The county attorney made $6 6,000 or 6,500 or something like that, and that, now it's what it is because of the inflation, and it's,
And one thing to note, that the similar line item for 2021, like in case my salary, 109,968, that was what we budgeted last July. It changed in January. And now it's going to, we're going to change it again. So I didn't jump from 109 to 113 in one fell swoop. There was a
Right.
stair step there. And same for the other constitutional officers, so.
that was your time in office that they got.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not just plugging that in because
No.
I need a new car or anything.
You have to.
Yeah.
I'd also
So-
like to point out that there are multiple people paid out of the line that says secretary to county attorney there. There's not one person making.
I was going to say, that's a good
$100,000
gig.
for that. Yeah, that is a misnomer. I don't want anybody to see that and start putting applications in.
Anybody have any questions about the first initial group of line items regarding the judge's office?
No.
I want to point out the training incentive that I have in my line items. I do not take a training incentive. That's for Kurt and Angela. County Attorney, I will let you talk about any of your line items you want to.
What this has done is we've built in modest increases for most of the folks. What we're trying to do in a couple of spots is we have one of the few ways that I can recruit and retain attorneys is that if you work for us for 10 years, your student loans are forgiven. So that's a good thing. Problem is, we've got a couple of really great folks that are at their 10 years, and there've already been people fishing around for them. So trying to figure out ways to keep them. So there's slightly larger increases for them to try to attempt to retain there. So what you see is modest increases on average there.
It would be lonely at midnight in traffic court.
Indeed. And that's not great for recruitment and retention either. But no, we've got a great staff, and this is an attempt to get some equity there across a couple of the situations as well.
And as far as I can tell, the rest of your line items remain unchanged.
Yes.
Yeah. Any questions of Steve?
And keep in mind also that particularly the child support attorney and a lot of the child support stuff you see there, we're able to get 2/3 of that reimbursed by the federal government. In fact, we've got almost, it's $37,500 right now. By the end of the year, it'll be over $40,000 that we're going to be.
This fiscal year?
Yes, for reimbursement for expenditures the county's made for this fiscal year. So, and that includes 2%, I think it's 2% of the utility cost for this entire building, because we use, the child support division uses 2% of the space. So that's ends up showing up in other ways throughout the rest of the budget, but that's, those are some reimbursements we're able to get.
Any questions of Steve?
No.
Renisa, you want to come to the mic as we go over your line items? Again, Renisa is subject to state adjustment on her salary, and it's a guess. It tends to be a few dollars either way if we guess well. Some salary adjustments, obviously, some pension adjustments to go with those, and then a new filing system you're anticipating, maybe. So go ahead, and I'll let you have the floor.
Under maintenance, repairs, and equipment, I have an increase of $16,500, and that's to purchase 5 easy file plat cabinets. Currently, we have 10 cabinets, and that will be, the 5 will be replacing the 10, if you can imagine, and room for approximately 4 more years of storage. So that kind of completes our basement refurbishment in space management, because we can't build out. So we've kind of applied for a grant and received a grant for a rolling shelving movable filing system, and that's freed up a ton of space. So I invite you to come on down and see that. It's pretty neat. But I received a grant that's already expended and that's finished. So This back wall of the basement area, it kind of finishes that off. It removes all of those plaque cabinets with 5 units that are much smaller. The footprint is much smaller, and also has much more storage. So I felt like it was beneficial for us, for the storage capacity alone, to go ahead and purchase these cabinets.
So that gets you 4 years down the road.
Right.
And where do we go from there?
I know.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, it's an issue.
I mean, and I think the court, maybe this court, we may not be here, but we can build over top of the sheriff's department, but we may have to think about that to give them more space, because I know they're really short.
I've heard differing opinions on that, but it seems the obvious choice. But yeah, above my pay grade right
Gray
now.
Hodge, 20 years ago, they did a drilling, and they came back that the soils would hold another there. We couldn't go up on this building, though, but we could on the wing over there, and so that, I think it's good to know
Yeah.
but I think you could go up 2 stories if you wanted to. That creates a little problem if you're trying to get there, though, because you'd have to go through your office. I mean, we only got 1 elevator unless you put in
Right.
another elevator, but that,
We've actually talked a little bit about flipping offices, bringing them up here and us going down into her office.
Okay.
There's so much more space, but that doesn't solve the basement issue.
right.
There's so much down
Right.
there. And the vault.
And the vault, the
Yeah.
security of the records, fireproof. I mean,
Right.
there's that issue as well, but, I mean.
And we talked about that with where our IT department is, but the floor is on a different level, too.
Right.
So that created some kind of problem. I forgot what it was, but that creates a problem, too. And then we got to take the IT department that needs cooling more than it's
Right.
important, so it's something we're going to have to work out, though.
It is. So this is my temporary solution to a age-old problem.
Yeah.
Clerks have a lot of information to store, and legally, we can't get rid of it. We
Right.
have to keep it, so trying to come up with the best ways, to maximize the space that we do have. So anyway, what that increase is. And then I have a $5,000 increase in election materials and supplies. It's to do with House Bill 574. There's a lot of unknowns. The bill passed, and it's out there. The law is out there, but the State Board of Elections doesn't have a clear plan of how to implement it yet. So a lot of that involves, the ability to consolidate precincts, which is great. It will save us money, but then it also adds 3 days of early voting, which is awesome as well. And last year we had early voting, which was great, and I think that was so successful that was folded into this bill, and I love that. But also you have staff for those days that you have to look at, and those expenses. So it's just a lot of unknowns with the new law. So I think, that increase will give me a little bit of flexibility to roll with whatever comes down the pike as far as that law is concerned.
So while she's up here, if you turn to page 3, the very bottom line item begins the election-related expenses, and of course, Renise and I work very closely on that because she runs the election. So that first line item at the bottom of page 3, reducing election officers' costs from $55,000 to $40,000, it not only reflects recent trends, but because of these wrinkles that Bernice is talking about that could be made permanent, including voting centers, which reduces the number of election officers, we felt good about saving that money, putting in a little bit more modest line item in there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is, and, I can move within those lines if I need to,
Yeah.
within that budget.
And then if you
So-
flip, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Flip to the top of page 4 are the rest, and you see the $5,000 increase in materials and supplies. The rest of the line items are the same, and that ends at voting machines, which we don't have any of, but those are those line items on elections. Any other thoughts about that or questions? Bernice is comfortable with all those numbers.
Right.
And Renisa, you've suffered some of the same problems that the other offices have with employees in trying to hire new employees and trying to retain the old employees. And are you comfortable with this? Is this going to?
Yes, I did, move up my, my payroll 17,000 more than, my maximum form is 17,000 more. But in 2017, I had a person retire in the recording department, and I replaced that person with a part-time position. So that worked out, but last year we were overwhelmed. You can imagine with, it was just, we had so much on us. And so I decided to move that part-time person back to a full-time position. So I've done that in this budget, and that person is being trained in both departments, so they can move from each department and be able to go where the need is. So I felt that was justified.
Well, and Renisa, as the other elected officials and department heads, I asked Renisa, do what you think's right for your people, and bring me back the number, and we'll work on that. And it's fair to say
Right.
that's what you did. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, your salaries from 2010 have gone up, that's 10 years, less than $80,000. And you've kept it really flat. You were the model.
Any other questions of Renisa or concerns? Or thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next on the list is the Sheriff's Department, and David Crafton's with us, if you want to come up to the mic. As you well remember, we had a discussion earlier this year about potential salary increases at that time, and we elected to wait till our typical budgeting season to address some desires from the Sheriff's Department. Again, worked very closely with them, asked them to bring to me what they wanted, they thought was they needed, and it followed very closely as far as the salaries go, what they presented earlier this year. I'll say right off the bat that they also cut some line items at our suggestion to help and to make it work, and with that I'll turn it over to you, David.
Okay. The salaries that you're talking about, there was an increase. Let me find my notes here. Shows an increase in salaries of $113,228. And then there's also a like increase in the retirement that goes along with that of $80,863. And only part of that is for that increase in retirement. But and part of it's for the increase in the factor that's figured. So, and then the cuts we made were, of course, in grants. We don't have any grants that are proposed right now. Vehicle repair, we were able to cut back $3,000. Canine supplies, our budget for that is $5,000, and our canine had to be retired. So for right now, we don't have a canine, and we were able to cut that part back. Fuel, because of the recent trends in how much we're spending on fuel, we cut back $10,000 on that. And on uniforms, we cut back $5,000. We're getting new uniforms for the guys that we're able to buy out of this budget. And so we're able to cut back on next year's budget because of that. Another increase we had to make was because of the increase of the price of vehicles. And $5,000 per vehicle is what we estimate we would have to spend conservatively. And so we need to increase of $15,000 in the new vehicle line item.
And I put down, did you just say anticipating needing 3?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any questions of David? Again, they reduced bailiff salaries by a significant amount to help with this, and the other line items that David mentioned. So I appreciate them digging in a little bit,
Yes, sir.
sharpening their pencil.
And something I don't know, but I think there is a penalty a retirement penalty for, I think it's either 5 or 10% within
10%.
10% within 5 years before they're going to retire. And you've got some people getting ready to retire.
Right.
So I guess my first thing would be hope that you don't do that, or it's going to end up coming out and costing us more money later in the future. Your total salaries budget's going up 9.17%, so that's pretty close to that. And I hope that a lot of that will go towards your new hires.
It is.
Okay, because that's where we got the problems of keeping people and trying to get them
Right.
there. So anyway, that's
We
all.
brought the new hire, what we're looking at is a pay scale where the new hires are brought up some. And then we want to, we're looking at eliminating one rank, which will shrink the number of levels that you have. And then when you go up from deputy to sergeant, we still want to keep that at 10%, but then as we progress higher, we want to lower you go down to 8% for lieutenant, 6% for colonel and so forth.
Okay. I mean, everybody's having this problem. The jail's having problems, and the clerk's office is having problems, and it's,
Yes, sir.
so I realize it, and I just want us to work.
Magistrate McCollum's
appreciate
question
that.
about that 10% raised within a few years of retirement is a good one. And I think you and I talked about this.
We
There's
have.
nobody in jeopardy of that, right?
No, we looked at the
Yeah.
ones that are approaching that, and I think we're good on that.
It can be a unintended trap there. Any other questions of David? Remember Tim, Magistrate Southern talking about them helping the expense, and
Yes.
they've tried.
So are we looking at a different way of moving up through the ranks?
As far
Like
as,
as your younger deputies. And then if somebody makes a lateral, they kind of get moved, or somebody moves here, they get moved up, and these guys here seem like they're hitting a wall where they can't move
it's only
up.
happened, oh gosh. Dwight moved over here from, after he retired from HPD, but he's been here, how many years? Yeah, so he went through court security, came over here, worked down in the office, and he moved up through the ranks slowly. We only have one that transferred over into another lieutenant's position. Other than that, we haven't had that happen, and it was out of necessity at the time that we had to do that. And it's kind of a new thing that we've run into the last several years, where you have retirees that are able to come back, and when they come back to work for us, you don't have to pay into retirement on them. And so it's something that's it's very attractive to hire people like that. And, it's hard to ignore that you don't have to pay into retirement on them because it's such a huge expense. And they have the experience, they're already POP certified. So every department, they compete for them. Everybody wants to get them.
Right.
Because it costs so much less to hire them and put them out on the street, so.
Well, I agree, and I want you to hire them if you can.
Yeah.
But I'm asking, are we creating like a ladder for the younger
The
people?
ladder's there.
It's there?
It is there, yes.
Okay.
I know we talked about it early on, that graduation, how they graduate up.
Right.
From that, coming in, you complete your training, you move up a pay grade, and so forth and so on. I believe that's.
Yeah.
Right,
what-
that's why I'm asking that.
When they graduate from the academy, they automatically get a $4,000 bump in pay from the state for completing that training. So that's the first level right there. And,
That's clef money, correct?
yes.
So
Yeah.
if you look in that line item, if you wondered what that is, that's
Right.
state money.
David, this may be a Steve Gold and your question too, but the bailiffs, I'm just making an assumption that they're down the money because they haven't had court.
Right.
And if we start having court till midnight, is that not going to kick?
We think there's still been enough money in that line item to absorb that, we believe.
Okay.
And, it's hard to predict these things.
Right.
And, but we tried not to take very much out of that. We lowered it a little bit, but not significantly.
And so far, all this night court has been on virtual through Zoom and everything,
okay.
so they don't have to be there. Courts are reopening to an extent to public business next week, beginning in May, so we'll see, but I'm hoping live doesn't go that late. If so, that will be an issue for both the clerk's office and the sheriff's department.
Right.
Any other questions of Dave? I appreciate him working with us on this.
Yes, sir.
We want to satisfy their need, making sure we keep the budget in check. And I will compliment the court. You know, our decisions to defease bonds and do other things that help reduce costs enable us to take that money and spend it on things we need, including our people, without having to increase the budget. It's a good way to go. Next is the coroner, and if Bruce can join us. He doesn't have a lot of line items, as you see, but he wanted a bump for his deputies, which are reflected there. We've also begun to talk about his office situation. We are continuing to kind of go back and forth with Deaconess, and I don't know how fruitful that's going to be, and it'll going to be an expense that we haven't incurred before. And I'm thinking very strongly of working with Bruce to relocate him to a current county facility that we won't have to pay rent on, and will be much less expensive for us and for him. So that's reflected in some of these line items. And if you don't mind me, Bruce, I'm talking for you, I know, but I wanted to kind of explain my thinking.
You're doing a
here.
fine job.
Two things, body transports, you see that line item drop. We bought a new van in order to help us not have to pay other people to do it, and it's working. For instance, through this fiscal year, you've only spent $1,800 on body transports, where we had $10,500 budgeted for it, so that's beginning to pay off a bit. The very next line item, supplies and expenses, goes up because, we're anticipating either we're going to have to start paying rent out at the hospital, or we're going to move Bruce into a county-controlled facility, and we might have to buy our own body cooler to do that. So I'm sure as we bring them out and locate them in the Sally Port in the jail, that'll be a fine arrangement. Yeah.
You know, I've already
absolutely.
walked over there and seen if there was any vacant land.
Yeah, or we park them in Andrew Powell's office in the back. There's room back there. So I know we've gone back and forth on price, but that cooler, we can probably get that cooler if we need to in this amount of money. But I just wanted you to know that we're going to have an ongoing discussion about perhaps Bruce locating in a county-controlled facility. There's a couple obvious spots, either an extra office at the road department, which is easy to access. We also have an office built in already into the storage building behind the Judicial Center, and a garage in which we could put a cooler. And as long as the zombie apocalypse doesn't hit, I don't think it's going to be a big deal, because it'll be out of sight and out of mind. But what's so funny?
Just wait a second, the best is coming.
But
Our judge plans for all contingencies.
the key here is we don't want to have a contentious ongoing negotiation with Deaconess. It's not been easy in any of our negotiations. They're good people. It's just very hard to deal with them sometimes. And they're new to us. We had arrangements with Methodists that are no longer in play because they have a new owner, and that's fine. But to save us money and to give Bruce what he needs as far as office space, going into a county-controlled facility might be the best way to go. So I think these line items anticipate either option. Does that make sense? We're talking about dead bodies and stuff like that. But he is a coroner, after all. So we're going to this is what I'm going to propose, and after, hopefully in the next month or two, we can make a decision here and bring back to court the plan and see if we can't fit it in with these line items that we've already spelled out here. Is that a good way to characterize what we've been talking about?
You were doing a pretty good job there. Thank you. If I can, I'd like to take one quick moment of personal preference for something. I'd like to thank the judge and the court for working with emergency management and Kenny Garrett like they have while we've been dealing with this pandemic. Kenny's done an outstanding job. I got talked in to come and help him it was only going to last 4 or 5 weeks, done a little longer than that. But your all's support in the supplies and all, I think the jailer will agree that we've all been working together to help. They've helped us get things ready, that we've helped in getting them supplies, the county fire departments, sheriff's department. Kenny was a lot about going on about the new clinic that opened up. So, I mean, he has done just a yeoman's job, and without your all's support, he wouldn't be able to do it. And don't tell him I was bragging about him, please.
Hey, can I go back to that cooler thing?
Yeah.
Do we own one right now? We
No,
have one?
No. No.
I'm getting ready to hit that one.
Oh,
The
well,
Bruce,
go ahead.
That was just my moment of
Yeah.
personal
Oh,
preference.
okay, gotcha, yeah.
I'd like to thank the judge and the court for working with us this year. I've been involved with the Henderson County Coroner's Office for 35 years, either as the deputy or the coroner. This past year has been the roughest we ever had in the number of cases and the types of cases and all we've had. Then plus working on some of the other stuff with Deaconess, I want to thank County Attorney Gold for all his help, because I don't understand legalese in the least bit, and he has helped me immensely with that. What it boils down to is Deaconess has Indiana attorneys and don't understand Kentucky law.
Well,
as part
be
of it.
careful in your comments, please.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's what we came to. So they didn't understand some of the Kentucky law. He helped with that. So no, we're good with that. We're talking. We have been based at the hospital for 35 years. Whenever Dr. Cantley took over in '85, all the corner stuff was stuffed underneath the stairwell coming in off of First Street. Then after that, we went to the hospital and things have gone real well. I've got a good staff and all, and we've been slowly building, but last year was a doozy for us. We're still working on it. I spent 5 hours today with 9 screaming women about a poor 9-month-old child who died. That's my job. You know, we do that and all, and my staff does that, but they've done an outstanding work, and we've got a good group. If we stay at the hospital, that would be outstanding. If not, I feel we're going to get something worked out where things will be good.
He asked about the cooler.
Huh?
Management Department asked, do we
about
own a
the
cooler? Yeah.
Now about the cooler. The cooler we're using right now is a 3-body cooler that belonged to the hospital. Methodist Hospital got it on a Homeland Security grant about 12 years ago. And it sat around, was being used some, not being used some, because the hospital only had a 1-slot cooling unit for the entire hospital. Hospital's grown since then. It got so we had no place to store bodies. It's amazing the number of bodies that families will not claim. We can't find family members to help sign off on.
Okay, all right. We don't own the cooler. We rent the cooler.
I think
We will-
the hospital received it through some sort of grant several years ago.
Yes.
It's relatively old, but it
yeah.
is still useful. And whereas they received it for free,
Yeah.
and Mr. Farmer's been able to use it for years
Right,
without any
right.
cost. They're now seeking to lease that
Right,
cooler
right.
to us.
Yeah.
And it's on its near its end of its life. So if we were to move, I don't think we'd want to buy that one and take it with us. It'd be better to buy
Yeah.
a new one in
So
there.
we've been looking. I would like to buy it from them because I've already talked to the company, and all we have to do is replace the cooler unit on top, and it's like a brand new one again. But that motor is rather expensive.
And we've had a bad experience or two in the last year with that thing malfunctioning.
Yes, whenever I was down to Coven, and we have talked about how we address that and putting monitors in there, and we're getting things squared away.
But I do think if we move, we will buy a new cooler. I think that's the best solution. And again, they're $6,500. Yeah, not much.
If we move somewhere else, yes, we're going to have to do something there. We just need someplace that has to be able to secure our cooler, all of our records, or our public records, and the ones I've got date back longer than 35 years, have to be kept, and we have no other storage space except our locked rooms. We have 2 rooms up at the hospital in the garage, what was the old ambulance service, and we're making it work at this point. We had an unfortunate accident this past year. I addressed it. The court helped us, we paid for it.
That was one of the malfunctions of the body cooler.
Yes, the motor had gone out while I was down with COVID-19. Because no one's in our office every day. All my people are part-time people. That's the way the county set it up. The only time they're in the office is if they have paperwork to bring in or a body to bring in. Just so happens that week was a quiet week. And suddenly I get a phone call, Bruce, we got a problem.
Okay.
I got out of bed and we started addressing it, and Tuesday morning I had a certified hazmat team in there cleaning up the
Okay.
area.
The details, I'm sure, are fascinating.
So hopefully what we.
It was fun. Well, I haven't got to the goody
But
part.
I know, yeah. I don't wanna-
Hopefully, best case scenario would be that we work out something with Deaconess to retain that space that we got.
That would be good. It will be more money. It will cost us more money. It's not money we're paying now. It wouldn't be tremendously expensive. However,
In my conversations with Mr. Farmer, he does believe that the current space and current situation is best to, respectfully care for the folks that, he's dealing with and to serve the public. However, if that's not possible, to come to terms with them, and he's been having some difficulty coming to terms with them, not just in the legalese of the lease, but the essentials of about what space can be used and things like that. If that can't happen, then we've got to look at Plan B.
And they don't understand what we do, just like a lot of other people. You all know you've got a coroner. You all don't know what the coroner necessarily all has to do. You think he goes out, they're dead, and that's it. Sometimes there's quite a bit that goes with it. I have two people that are bloodhounds. If you've got a family member somewhere, it amazes me how they find some of these people. The county attorneys help us too. But then the families don't want, there's no law that says you have to claim the body. So that brings us into the indigent program about how to deal with bodies. There's a whole lot that all goes into this, and like I said, the judge has been helpful with us. We finally have a line item for indigent burials. I hope we don't have to use it all at any time, but we have been lately a couple here and there.
okay.
So we're really
Thank you.
appreciative of that. Now, I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a minute or two.
Can't do it in a minute, Bruce.
Is this about your salary?
It's not in.
Is this about your salary?
Not just mine.
Okay, well, before you go there.
Okay.
But I was going to talk about Bruce's salary a second, but does anybody have any questions about the other line items that we've gone over? He has 5 deputies or 6?
5 working deputies and 1 part-timer and 1 office person. There's 7 of us, 8 of us all told.
8, so you have a lot of deputies, you have a lot of help.
Yeah.
But they're all part-time, right?
7
Yeah.
part-time, Bruce?
Yeah, yeah. They all have to be on call, they take time,
Right.
sometimes you need that many people.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about the rest of his line items? Tried to describe that cooler situation as best I could there.
It's going to be interesting this
Okay,
year.
okay,
Okay.
excuse me. Any other questions about the rest of Bruce's line items? No? Okay. Now, it has been the tradition since I got here and even before that the coroner was paid the same amount as magistrates. And that's what we have done. We leave it up to the magistrates and fiscal court every year to follow and do what they want to with these next several line items, including your salaries. And Bruce's salary, in tradition, reflects your salaries. Now, Bruce has asked for a slight increase for himself. I don't know whether we want to break precedent and do that for him and while you consider your own salaries. I don't have a preference there.
I think the law is that we cannot increase our salaries during our term.
Our term.
I don't know about Bruce's, but I think that's the same for Bruce.
No,
Yeah.
I fall into the same thing when you go by the main part of the salary. But I can't remember if it was while you were still county attorney or after Steve had taken over. 1 year, we came in there and did a cost of living adjustment. Cost of living adjustment for constitutional officers is okay, we were told then. All it is cost of living, it's not a major pay raise.
It
per
would
se.
be 3%. If that's allowable, I don't have any objection to that. if that's allowable.
I'm bringing this discussion up for me and 5 friends. There are 6 of us that fall underneath that category. And I just bring it up for the sake of, Butch always has the answer for me. What's the answer, Butch?
Brad has
Years.
already put an increase for everybody but you.
And you.
Well, but you can't, I don't
No.
think we want to go there. I don't think the magistrate want to. I don't.
I gave them all raises except you, Bruce. We're kidding. I'm
It
kidding.
wouldn't be
I'm
the
joking.
first time.
I'm joking.
I
No,
tried to be
Bruce,
a team player.
But
All
to
right.
your question, it's been something like 25, 26, 27 years since
Yeah.
anybody that
The
sits on
magistrates
this
has stayed the same.
stayed
Right.
the same. Yeah.
Since
Now
1984, I think, and they took the $3,000 expense allowance.
And rolled
added
it
that-
in,
And
and rolled
rolled
it
that
in,
in
yeah.
to it at some point.
So Bruce has made his request. That's his request. Now, I guess, and
Do we have to answer that right at this moment?
No.
no.
But the
I don't
line
think so.
item on here don't show an increase.
It's, yeah, I
No.
kept it same over same for this example until we were able to discuss it.
Okay.
I just brought it up, Tim, for
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
for
Steve-
me
Steve's doing
and
some
the
research
5
now.
of y'all.
Let's,
And like I
So,
said-
so why don't we table that for a moment while we continue to go through, and we'll get a more clarification on what y'all can do, because the next several line items are the magistrate's line items, the fiscal court line
Can
Ken,
items.
I-
I sit down now?
please.
Yes.
I was doing so well. Yes, Charlie, you joking?
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I
Bruce.
said, please sit
You're
down.
doing great.
I just-
You're doing great.
Oh, I want,
Thank you, Bruce.
I want to thank y'all for working with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate you too, Bruce. Just the thought came to my mind, and y'all know how crazy my mind works, so you got to bear with me. We have a problem at the jail in that we don't have enough space for the commissary. And I know Amy's had a whole lot of stuff on her mind besides this. We looked at the property across the street, and that didn't work out. We looked at maybe renting buying the city out of that ambulance service, but now the hospital wants that, so that's gone. And Brian, if I'm not mistaken, the county doesn't have to comply with all planning and zoning rules. If we wanted to possibly put another building across the street, or something is that a possibility?
That's an L-shaped lot across the way too.
Good. I just want to make sure you were done. Charlie, I think you're right. There's a little bit of a caveat to that, that local municipalities are exempt from zoning.
Right.
You still would get into the building code and stormwater.
Oh,
But yeah,
absolutely.
there's a little caveat there that you're referring to.
Yeah, and we normally want to stick with planning and zoning. We're not trying to do it, but it's just a possibility that we might be able to add something. Maybe bring Bruce into it if that's a necessity.
Okay.
But at least to do something about the commissary at some point in time.
Just a thought, food for thought, Bruce.
When we did the property originally, only where the pavement was is what the city and county bought. I went to the bid of Mr. Danheiser and tried to buy the rest of that lot, and the city didn't agree with the price, so we stopped there. But Mr. Danheiser, when he sold the property at the end of Borax Drive, asked the city if we still wanted that property behind the ambulance service, and he was told yes. He gave that hunk of property that's really bigger than what the building's sitting on to the city and county. So right now, the jailer owns one section of it, and the other one is a city-county split that is vacant behind. the
Maybe a
building.
topic for a future
Yeah.
discussion here.
So there is room.
So if you go to, and I know Steve's probably still doing a little bit of research here, the magistrate's line items, and we'll leave the salaries out of it for a moment. The increase in retirement is obviously not related to increase in salaries, just the increase in the pension percentage we have to pay. The advertising for fiscal court line item changed simply because we haven't been spending that much money, so I right-sized that a bit. The rest of it, I believe, is exactly the same.
Yeah, I have no problem with it.
Yeah. Again, the discussion is whether you are able or want to alter your salaries.
Right. The fiscal court used to sometimes need other legal services, but then we've got Steve and his assistants have been really good in handling most everything we've got, so I think we're good.
Any questions about those line items? Okay, then, the next few line items are kind of rote and they're unchanged. The PVA statutory contribution bill was sent to me. It is exactly the same. That's not going to change. Next, any questions about any of those? The Board of Assessment Appeals, PVA phone, it all stayed the same. Next, County Treasurer, if you don't mind me speaking for you, Brenda. Again, some salary increases and concurrent retirement increases. We dropped the data processing supplies a bit. And those are the only other changes. Brenda's done a good job of staying under her budget. And this encompasses both her position and Paula Wilson's position. Any questions about those? You'll see a difference in training incentive, and this is true across the board. The state kind of gives us guidelines about increases in training incentives, and you see this in your training incentive line items, depending on the number of years you've been in office, and also from state guidance, they dictate what our training incentive elements are. Does that make sense? If you noticed back in your magistrate's line item for training incentive, it bumped up a bit. Okay, don't hear any questions about that. Occupational tax administrator, we turned that part-time job into a full-time job, and that salary that we set will stay the same next year. There was an increase in retirement because of turning that into a full-time job and then the 12%, but the rest of his line items remain the same, and there will be no raise for that position this year, this new fiscal year. The next group are Brent Jacobs in his office, network technician, again, a raise in pay with concurrent increases in retirement. The rest of his line items for equipment have stayed the same. He's done a very good job of staying within his budget line items, and unless we had a situation like the storage units that you needed. Am I saying that right? Servers. And he never comes to me unless he really needs it. And I appreciate that. And he does an excellent job. Any questions about those? Tim, am I going too fast? I don't want anybody to think I'm rushing through. Beth,
Good
you
so
okay?
far.
Huh?
I'll swaff you.
Okay. The next few, the law librarian, those items stay the same. Steve, anything? Nope. The election, we've already gone over the election line items. The Planning Commission, if you keep scrolling down, all those remain the same. When we get to the Planning Commission, Brian came to the City County Work Group, and Butch, please chime in when you need to. The City County Work Group works together to oversee the requests of agencies like the City County Planning Commission that we share in common. And the first thing we like to do is have them make a presentation about what they'd like. We talk about it. Butch represents the fiscal court as well as Beth, and if it seems acceptable, we agree to take it to our respective court or commission. Brian has, another guy's done a very good job with his budget, asked for a little bump for pay raises. Any other line items in there that were increases? You cut some things too, I think, here and there, yeah.
You want me to explain?
Please.
Thanks, Judge. I'll be brief. Roughly, we asked for a 1.5% increase, and that's largely due to cost of living and insurance costs, in addition to what we all know about pension contributions. We were able to offset that in other places, such as travel, capital outlay, things like that. So 1.5% is the total ask.
The City County Work Group,
Yeah, and we
with this?
did. We agreed to bring that back, but that was very
yeah,
reasonable.
at
So-
this number, yeah.
I'm not trying to stir anything up, but 6 months ago, 1.8 was good, but 3% now is about where we are at cost of living.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has changed, so I don't know whether that's something to consider or not.
Well, we left it up to Brian to bring his request, and
We included 1.9% cost of living into ours.
he is the,
Okay.
runs the office.
I'm good. I just,
If
the numbers have changed.
Yeah,
And it's not to the good, but.
we've always encouraged Brian to bring what he thinks is right for him to us, and so far it's been good, and then the city county work group, fine with this. Anything you want to add? Any questions of Brian? And they're right in the middle of another big project for us coming up, and we'll talk about that in a few months, our
Hope so.
41 strip project.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. I didn't mean to rush. Any other questions on that? Okay. The next bunch of line items starts for our maintenance staff here, Charlie Ransom, his part-time assistant, and a part-time assistant we have at the Judicial Center. The reason that has dropped from the number you see, 63,588 down to 44, is Charlie Ransom asked for a reduction in pay. And I know Charlie's got his opinions on this, but Edward Jones' segment is going to be delayed here for a while. In order to maximize his Social Security. He can only make so much money, and I know Charlie's just chomping at the bit over there. And I asked him to go see you before he did that.
No, I tried to talk him out of it.
Yeah.
Oh.
He
So-
got that for every two, you got to give back one.
Yeah, so.
Over
so
that 18.
We acquiesced to his request to do that so he could maximize. He's still working for us. He's
We're
just.
fortunate to have him.
Yeah,
and-
so this was a requested voluntary drop in pay, that's why you see that, yeah. But he's making more overall because of his Social Security payments. And we're glad he's with us. The result of that is you see the reduction in his retirement cost, same reason. The rest of his line items, including our contract with France, remains the same, including our utilities expense here at the courthouse. Any questions about that? Next, airboard maintenance. This was another one that was brought before the city county work group. Just very slight change there, I think related to a salary or two. Again, they charge us a flat rate. They handle their retirement and insurance out of that flat rate. We split it with the city. Next, we get a building inspector salary. That's Randy Tassa. And slight salary increase, retirement obviously increased, reduction in demolition costs based on recent trends. He's been able to get those demolitions done at a fairly good price and has not spent close to 40, so we reduced it down to 30 to help cover his salary increase. I believe the rest of his line items are the same. And he is being aggressive on the demolitions. Got a couple in the works right now. Going into EMA, Kenny Garrett and his team, other slight increases. Increase in pay for Kenny in retirement. The EMA supplies, we dropped that down from $70,000 to $53,800, both to help cover his salary increases and because he anticipates not needing nearly that much in the coming year for his supplies.
Is that because of COVID
Well-
getting better, hopefully?
And we bought a ton of supplies. We've got a pretty big stockpile. So
Because of-
he's not anticipating having to completely replace it.
Okay.
And he said if we have to buy more, 53.8 is plenty. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, but we've gotten to the point where we're getting pretty good chunks of PPE free from the state. The state's just handing it to us. We'll take that every time we get. And it's all right. You're not as fine. You're not as fine. So yes, this will cover supplies in Kenny Garrett's estimation. Okay. Any questions about that? I don't think Kenny's here, is he? Yeah. Kenny watches this very closely. This is also something we share with the city, and I guarantee you in these times he wouldn't provide us numbers that he thought he was gonna need and just back it down to please me, he made this estimation with me, so. Next, you see the reduction in the ambulance service. That's a great thing to see. It's gonna help us plenty in the future. Any questions about that? That flat rate should start soon. I think our contract that we just signed kicks in pretty quickly here.
Yes.
Okay, the last page of the general fund on page 5. I hope you all are with me. Everybody awake out there? Important stuff. Megan, wake up. The rest of these are kind of odds and ends. Not many of them have changed, other than you see that the 911 debt service comes off the books. The 911 bond, which is 1.667 million, comes off the books. Our memberships, the only membership cost, we increased one because we're now part of the West Kentucky Coalition. That was $1,000, and we added that into the budget. Now, if you get down to contingency appropriations, that is the money that we put into the general fund when we add up the expenses and add up the revenue. If there's more revenue than expenses, we take the difference and put it into that contingency fund for emergencies. That's for contingencies, things that we might not have anticipated. That drops down to 551 because I think we're going to be fine with that number, and it helps balance the books. Again, that is surplus that we can use just for whatever we need, and it's great to even have it. When I got here, there was no such thing in the budget as contingency. Am I right, Butch? I mean,
You are correct.
yeah, so the fact that we've had a healthy contingency line item in the fund has been one of the reasons why we've never had to pull money out of reserve just to meet everyday line item needs. I'm glad that that's there every year. And part of that is our budgeting, staying tight on our budgeting. Social Security goes up, and that is, tied to salary increases, but it didn't increase all that much, 16,000 and change. Workers' compensation dropped because of our record, and we share that among departments. I think there's a workers' comp line item in the jail, there's a workers' comp line item in the road, and we share that among each other, and we've done pretty well. We are also anticipating a rebate here, or a dividend for our workers' comp from CAECO. I don't know if that's hit yet or not. Yeah. And the in lieu of tax payments, you see there at the end have dropped because we closed out 2 industrial revenue bonds, so those will no longer be flowing through. I think we have one left, which is Columbia.
This workers' compensation, with us starting a safety program, will it go down more?
Could. Very well could. I know Angela's, and that's part of the reason we're doing it, is to try to save ourselves some money. So, one bad year, though. A couple bad accidents, and there we go. You know that well.
That's why we're having a safety program.
So we get down to $9,492,829, which is very comparable to what it was 3 years ago. Even as we gave pay raises and had to handle pension increases, it's keeping it very tight, and I'm proud of that. And I appreciate the help of the elected officials and department heads to do that. So that's the general fund. Mr. Gold, take it away.
On the subject of elected official salaries, it's actually not a statute. It's the Kentucky Constitution, Section 235. Reads, the salaries of public officials shall not be changed during the terms for which they were elected, but it shall be the duty of the General Assembly to regulate by general law in what cases and what deductions shall be made for neglect of official duties. Then, of course, they say the section shall also apply to members of the General Assembly. Subsequent case law has interpreted that section of the Constitution to say that, as Magistrate McCollum referred to earlier, changes for consumer price index cost of living is not considered an increase in the salary because it's the same purchasing power. So that can be done during the term, and that's what's done. Typically, like you talked about, letters coming from the state saying this is what we declare the CPI to have been, and they raise it then. But as far as raises over and above CPI for elected officials during their terms, that is unconstitutional under Kentucky law.
Gotcha.
And I think the treasurer has a letter that they sent about Steve's saying what they would be.
Yeah, and they do that for all the elected
Right.
officials.
So-
Bruce, you have a letter indicating what the CPI is being considered, 3.3%?
I've been getting so many different figures from
Okay.
different people.
The answer is no, okay. So that, well, I'll ask it this way. Depending on what the CPI actually is, and we can find that out, do you want to take that for yourselves and then also?
No,
Okay,
I don't want to take it from me, but I don't have a problem if the other magistrates are willing or want to give it to Bruce, I don't care.
and the money would come out of, we just take it away from that contingency line item. It wouldn't be very much money, but I'll entertain the discussion and the pleasure of the court.
With his guys being part-time, they're not in the retirement system, right?
That's correct.
That's right.
And
We're talking about
He just talking about his.
Bruce's salary.
Just
Right.
his-
His
give
his
his
assistants
guys
can be given
a raise.
raises
Yeah.
through the term. It's the elected officials that constitutional section applies to. So it's you all, other elected officials, and the coroner. So.
Now,
Okay.
Tim, I was only gonna do it as everybody did, so we all stay the same. You know, I
That's been the
wasn't-
tradition,
I
but
wasn't doing this just for me.
Right, understand. I'm good with it,
what are you doing what?
giving him the 3.3,
Okay.
if, whatever it is, whatever.
What, we'll have to find that out, exactly what that CPI is.
Right.
We're not voting on anything today, just kind of a straw poll here.
Well, and from a budgeting standpoint, it might make sense to look at what that CPI was from last year and then also project a little ahead, because that new CPI number will come out in January. So presuming that would be what the court wanted to do to increase that on that CPI in January. So it might actually be a little more, if that makes sense.
With the court's pleasure, I'll go ahead and do that calculation, get with
That's
Bruce. It won't amount to any staggering amount of
No,
money.
it won't.
Am I correct in hearing that you do not want to do the same for yourselves at this point?
I'll go along with whatever the rest of the magistrates want to do, but I'm not really pushing it for myself.
Again, okay. Doesn't seem like we have,
We can talk about it later, Judge. I
fine.
I have no problem with giving it to the coroner. I mean, but I don't know about us, to be honest with you, it's kind of.
okay. All right,
I
okay.
think it's more discussion.
It comes up every year. We know that magistrates work hard. It's not a part-time job in reality. But I know it's very difficult to stand in front of God and country and say, I'm going to give myself a raise. You know, I get that. But it comes up every year, and I would respect either decision you make. So I don't think you're doing it for the pay. And, you know, with the expense money you get and the training incentive, it does, you know, compensate your time, I think, in a more fair manner. But I will leave that alone then, and I will figure out the increase for the coroner. Yes, Bruce?
I'm one of these, I always want to be a team player, that there's the 6 of us. If 5 of the 6 don't want to do it, then I don't want to do it either. I just brought that up due to the fact of how long it's been for doing the adjustments.
Okay.
That's all, you know, cost of living is small compared to what we can do.
Okay.
But
We
give it to
appreciate
the
you, Bruce, and
deputies,
what-
right?
Huh?
We give a raise to the deputies, the way I'm seeing it here.
We gave a raise to them, yes.
Yes, okay.
Bruce, I'll do what you want. You,
I want to be with the team.
okay, got it. There you go. Any other questions about all the general fund line items? We've taken some time with them. I don't want to rush. Okay. Everybody good? Okay. To the road fund, and Mr. Hubiak, if you want to come on up to help with this, I'll mention a couple things. This current year, we have a lot of money in the budget for the Ohio Drive project, and that's all coming out. So in comparing this year-over-year budget, you know, there's going to be a drop, but remember, part of that was Ohio Drive, so it's not necessarily anybody's genius, that just money's coming out. On the other hand, I wanted to make sure that we added more money into Bill's budget to keep ratcheting up what he's able to do. So even after taking out the Ohio Drive money, I still asked him to work on $4.9 million, which is another increase from his budget minus the Ohio Drive money. Does that make sense? I don't want to get anybody confused there. That Ohio Drive money is unusual. So with that number, 4.9, Bill went through his line items. He's very good at budgeting, as you know. He's done a great job. And I'll let him start from the top in his line items and talk about them as they go.
Well, started off, the judge was very gracious to let all the department heads give raises and salary increases to the people that they felt were appropriate in their areas. As you can see, our recycle solid waste coordinator, Nancy Watkins, is doing what I think is a really great job, and so the raise reflects that. The employees at the recycling were also given they are the lowest paid employees that we have at the county, the parks, and recycling employees. And so when I looked at our budget, I decided that I thought it was better for us to give the biggest increase to the people that made the least. We have a lot of good employees right now, and I don't want to lose them. They've been well trained. They're very safe workers and good workers, and like I said, I think our total workforce has been the best that I've ever had in the 23 years of being here. And we all work together, and that's why it was evenly spread throughout all the departments the same way. So as we go down through your line items, you're going to see that we're being very good with staying within our line item budgets of what everything else, so you see that nothing else changed other than the salaries and retirement in recycling. Go down to the next section, which is parks. And like I said, it was the same thing. We had some added increase of duties to some of our people. And like I said, as you can see, the parks employees there was the biggest jump right there, 11,000 on them, and we only have 4 full-time employees there. So part-time work has been great for us. We've learned how to cycle that in, and even with Amy's not having her inmates to help us, we were able to work it out that we just kept our head above water all last summer with as much rain and grass growth as we did. So we felt that we could get through it again if we have to this way until she can get back to where she can help assist us with some of the mowing. So any questions on any of that?
I will say that I selected Bill's new pay number, not Bill, just so you know. Just so you don't think Bill's just writing numbers in for himself.
Same thing with the road department employees. We adjusted the operators and equipment accordingly to the right number of employees that are in those slots to make sure that we have basically 3 levels of employees at the road department. You have the truck driver, you have the equipment operator, and you have the heavy equipment operators, which also includes the mechanics. You see there that the everything right there was the same with the increases, and then down at the bottom we have our retirement, which jumped up about 60,000 due to those numbers.
Your heavy equipment operator went down, Bill.
Do what?
The heavy equipment operator went down. Why did it? Did we lose somebody?
We had more people. We had we corrected the number of people that were actually in there. Okay.
There were some who were misclassified.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We didn't reduce anybody's pay. They all got increases, but what there was there were some discrepancies in how many people were actually in that line item. So we corrected it. So you go on down there, our line items stayed the same except for bridge construction. I put 25,000 extra in there. We have a large structure that's going to go in next year that's underweight on Hatchet Mill Road. It's in Beth's district, close to the borderline with Mr. Berry. And, but I took her out there a couple weeks ago and showed her the condition and the problems we're having with the smaller structure and erosion and the roadway being eaten away alongside of it. So we're gonna have to address that one next year. Added some money into blacktop because, as you all know, I feel that's an area that we need to try to do more of. Rock materials stayed the same, everything else. Maintenance and repairs of equipment, we bumped that up. And what that is, what you see in there, partially that's, we need to take down the old sheds that were built for the equipment that was here when I got here. Our new trucks will not fit under them. And we're gonna need to do something about that. We have just put up the 75 by 100-foot airport hangar. The recycle, that's down by recycling. That will be used to house the recycling materials that are now in our equipment bays where our gradals are supposed to be parked. Once we get them moved down, we'll have enough area inside that hangar to also park the roll-off truck that sits outside all the time. The 2 tractors that are part of the tractor trailers that the Sheriff's Department has gotten us. And we'll be able to keep the bucket truck in their side also that the Sheriff's Department has got us to help these pieces of equipment last longer. But we got to do something with them, that old shed, and so we put $100,000 in there because it's not actually new equipment, but it's, I don't have a line item for building repair or maintenance, so that's where we decided we'd put it in there. So,
Can you jack it up? And
do what?
can you find an engineer that can design how to jack it up?
They're old telephone posts. It's kind of hard to make them extend them. They don't weld together real well, Charlie. Sorry. If I could, I would. I've already looked at it enough. But we won't have to tear out the concrete or anything else. I mean, we'll be able to salvage all that that's down on the bottom. So we'll just, red ed the new structure to it. So we're pretty good there. New equipment and machinery, we kept it at the same. The truck we ordered last year came in this year. We paid for it out of this year's budget. The one we ordered this year is not going to be here by the end of this budget. And I do have a concern that we'll probably have to talk about later, but as you've seen in the newspaper and on TV, Ford in Louisville is going on a 2-week furlough because of the chip problem that they're having. Well, our F-550 that has been ordered is scheduled to be built on the 17th of May. Now, with this 2-week furlough, there's no way that that truck's going to be built and delivered now in this budget.
We'll just make that adjustment when we
So-
can.
You know, Bill, they're storing them at the Kentucky Motor Speedway. They got the whole speedway is full of Ford product, waiting on them to chip.
Yeah.
This is the problem we're having, and I know we don't have carryover, but we're gonna need to discuss how that's gonna come in, because it's gonna come in next year's budget, and the 270 was set there for what
Right.
we need next year.
I think we can kind of cross that bridge when we get there,
Okay,
see what happens.
all right?
If that's
I
okay with the
appreciate
court,
I
Yeah.
appreciate you bringing it up now.
Sure.
That way we aren't.
Right.
It's totally out of my control and yours too. I mean, it's nothing we could do. We couldn't get our F-250 because they stopped production the 1st of February. So,
Can I sort of go back to what Tim was asking earlier about the blacktop and how bad the roads are? Is this going to help us gain any ground on that 70%? When you had those roads analyzed and, it had dropped like 30% in
we're
4
going
years.
to try, we have been adhering to the condition of the roads based on the assessment and trying to do as much as we can with what we have to work with every year. That's not going to change. We did get some rubberized asphalt on Ohio Drive last year. And if it proves out like it's supposed to, it will help the longevity of the road surface last longer due to the elasticity that the rubber puts into it. You know, we have looked at this, I've looked into it, we participated, even though we did not get the grant last year. The company just thought it was a great place to test the product. They gave it to us and put it in the mix with their own people. So we applied again this year for it. We have another great road to put it on, and I think that this is something that we will need to look at as we go down the road to try to help improve our road conditions and the longevity of them. Also, we're having a lot of longitudinal cracking on our walking trails. And I'm going to try this rubberized asphalt on this section we just got the grant for to see if it will eliminate that or minimize it. So we're going to try to do things smarter. Yes, there is a little bit of an added cost to it, but if it works out like it's supposed to, the cost is very minimal to what you're going to get in longer years of life without, having to maintain it like that.
If I can add to that, we didn't reflect it in this budget because you just never know about FEMA, but we are in line to keep getting FEMA reimbursements based on what happened a couple of years ago. And I'm going to encourage Bill to use all that towards asphalt. Anything we get in from FEMA to put it towards our roads. And that could be a little, it could be a lot, depending on.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, but not only to the people that vote us into office, those roads are really important to them for transportation to get to their homes and whatnot. But I mean, just for trying to get businesses to come to Henderson, Kentucky, which I think is part of our job, if we don't have good infrastructure, we're messed up. So we got to keep on the best we can. And I just pray that the legislature will come to terms with it next year and think about raising the gasoline and other taxes and make it more fair for the people that are driving battery cars that pay nothing.
Charlie, I've been going to the same talks for 23 years.
I know.
So I'm well versed.
I would not hold my breath there.
Believe me. Unfortunately. So, I mean, it's amazing. But we do with what we have the best we can, okay? I can assure you all that. So we try to make sure it's done to every penny is spent as wisely as we can. So
What happens if we rode the roads the other day and we've got some that's got extensive cracking, but it's not chipped out yet? But when we start resurfacing, if we've got potholes throughout the road.
That's why we have the hot patch machine. And the hot patch machine had both trucks that can pull the hot patch machine had significant problems here. And it's due to us pulling that machine so much, the weight on the back end of the F-550 trucks that we have caused some problems. And both were down at the same time. The machine is now back out in operation. Of course, they weren't doing much patching today, just because of the fact of the rain.
But when we do the hot patch, that will allow us to go ahead.
That helps us immensely. Even before we go ahead and blacktop a road that'll be on your list, we send the hot patch machine out there to try to repair and stabilize all the alligatoring and cracking and anything that needs to be done prior to putting the new asphalt on top of it. That way we don't get the mirror image come right back through. If you don't do something to treat it before you do that,
it will come back.
It will come right back. And you didn't spend your money smartly. So we did that even on Ohio Drive. Anywhere we had a bad spot, we either cut it out and patched it in there, or if it was alligatored or cracked, we did the whole road before we did any cover. So, any other questions?
Good job, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we go to the jail, I thought I'd just finish out kind of the general fund appropriations and get those done with Amy before we head to yours. If you go to page 10, LGEA, this is another place where we're able to create some savings. Starting with the volunteer fire department. Now, I know it doesn't look like we saved money here, but I met with the chiefs 2 Saturdays ago, and what I'd like to do is give them a flat $9,000 per volunteer fire department to help support them. What we were doing before was paying their insurance costs, and with the new money they're getting from the dues on tax bills, they all went out and got new equipment. Good for them. Some of them fixed up their fire barns. Good for them. Their insurance costs went through the roof, and it cost us more money than we thought, and it was going to be an ever-growing line item. So I thought in order to cap our costs, make it more predictable, I offered them $9,000 a year, and I didn't get any bad feedback. For some of them, this will be more than they're getting because they haven't bought as much stuff yet. Some of them, it's slightly less, but it's still $99,000 total for us. It's about what we were giving anyway. So it's not a huge impact, but it does help us budget better.
I think you made a wise decision there.
Again, none of the chiefs gave me any feedback. They are as well-resourced as they have ever been, I would say, in our county, which is a good thing. I told you about the communication 911 dispatch subsidy and how the water bills, the dues on water bills, fees on water bills is working as we'd hoped. More money is going into that fund, and so our subsidy is falling. Humane Society, their request stayed the same year over year. Came before the City County Work Group, told us they just needed same they had last year. I told you about landfill and solid waste. We'd always budgeted a little high for that, and we're right-sizing that a little bit. Let's see, Canoe Creek. We kind of alternate years. One year we give them $45,000. Next year we give them $65,000. Some of that has to do with mowing and other contracts. This is the year it goes to $65,000. So that's where we are. A couple slight changes in the senior companion programs, just $500 here and there, $250. Pauper burials, I reduced that in half because, number one, Bruce is doing a better job of getting families or getting indigent cases cremated, which is much less money than having. We were really worried we were going to have to be paying for full burials, and my firm admonition to Bruce was to let's get these indigents cremated and save our costs, and he has done that. So we have not had any expense in that line item since we introduced it a year and a half ago. So I thought I'd roll the dice. Not that I could find, certainly not this year.
Yeah, we just did
Well-
one
We just paid,
2 weeks ago.
we just paid for one in Tuesday's court,
How much was it?
$1,000.
Well, hopefully we won't have that side. But we can adjust that now, but we haven't, that's the only one we've had this year. That was a full-blown burial? No, just a cremation? Okay, well,
I think it was 2 cremations. Our lady from the University of Louisville Hospital, and then the other one was, I forgot. It's a lady from U of L was forever. Now, I've got one that works right now that the state is going to pay for.
Great.
Even, so we're doing better there.
I'd like to leave it at 2,500 and just see how it goes. If we've
Hey,
gotta make
Bruce, wouldn't that
change.
cost though on a cremation 500?
Do what?
Wasn't the cost on cremation 500?
It's
Did we
what
talk?
it's been for the time being.
Yeah.
They are talking about, well, I've been working with the city in their indigent program. They're looking at raising from 300 to 800 for indigent burials and from 300 to 600 for cremations. So there may be a slight increase, but we don't know yet for how much. And then that's what I was wanting to bring to the county to get them set up the same type of policy.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'd like to leave it now and see how it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah,
If-
okay.
If we have to add money there, it's not a big deal. The human rights request there, that came before the City County Work Group. Slight increase for Reverend Johnson and a little bit more money for his travel, conferences and training, if I remember correctly, Butch.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
obviously a little concurrent bump in retirement costs there too, but the city county work group okayed that, city okayed that, at that number.
To put all that in perspective, we were paying about, our share was prior to Reverend Johnson, we were out about 55,000 or something like that with
I believe
benefits and
that's right.
everything.
I believe that's
For
right.
the, for us and the city as well, so it's
Right.
about 110,000.
Yes. It's been a good deal, and he's done a good job.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm putting back in our Handy Fest donation this year because it looks like we're going to have a Handy Fest. And we made a donation the year before last that was not used because they didn't have a festival. I think that's going to be carry over, and they're going to use that revenue to help put on this year's. And then if they'd like us right after the turn of the year, if this is approved, make the donation in July to help them further with this year, or wait till next year in the same way. So, but we're back to helping sponsor the Handy Fest. We want to turn the page here. There aren't too many line items in LGEA left. Again, I talked about busing parochial students being reduced. Everything's the same, the miscellaneous. So we reduced LGEA expenses by more than $100,000, which was good. Any questions about that?
I guess I got ahead of you, Judge, but I was thinking about our industrial development.
Right. We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Talk about that in a second. In fact, if you flip the page, well, state grants is on the next page again. That's money in, money out. We have typical same amount of grants every year. I noticed the rubber grant is going down significantly. Brenda, I know the, is that a typo?
That's what Nancy
Okay.
submitted to me.
But again, that's money in, money out, not really an expense to us in the long run. Economic development, this hasn't changed. We support EDC at $50,000 a year, and then BridgeLink at $10,000 a year, have for some time. Since we have reconstituted the Industrial Development Authority, I've talked to the Finance Committee about bootstrapping that organization with some money before the end of this fiscal year out of this current budget, because I think we're going to have it. And for next year, I'm going to ask Brenda to put a line item in for the IDA under economic development, but not put any money in there yet. Just see what happens with economic development. Our bootstrap this fiscal year will get them, enable them to open a bank account. If they have to enlist some counsel for their meetings, it'll get them going. But as far as ongoing expenses related to economic development projects, all that money is going to come from the county anyway, flowing through the IDA. So if we leave a line item there with zero and we need to do something, it'll be there for us to put money into. I don't think we have to budget anything for them next year just out of normal operating, because I think whatever we can do for them this year will carry them in that regard through the next fiscal year. Does that make sense, Butch?
Got it. Yeah.
So I'll be
Yes, sir.
working, within the next couple, 3 fiscal courts, I'll be bringing a proposal to bootstrap them some money out of current funds. But we're going to put that IDA line item in there. You'll see it when we get the budget. And health insurance, as I said, we're keeping it the same on the expense side and on the revenue side for claims. Any questions? So back to the jail. So Amy, if you want to approach the bench again, I almost hate to say that. Sounds judgmental. I'm trying to loosen up. It's been a long meeting so far. And I'm doing a bad job. Okay. I'll start off, if you don't mind, Amy. One of the things I want to point out in her expense line items here, and specifically when it comes to deputies and matrons, that second line item, she has to budget for all the potential slots she has to fill. And there are 30, I think, 30 to 40 empty slots. Am I right? I mean, somewhere in that number.
52.
52.
Wow.
So, and her prospects for filling 10% of those, or 20% of those in the next 12 months, it's going to be a hard slog, you know.
Most people applying for jobs aren't eligible to work at the jail.
Yeah.
I've found that out.
So even though we know her employment numbers are going to continue to be kind of a challenge, she still has to budget in case she fills them all. And salaries for those and retirement benefits for those. So her cost, as you can see if you go to page 9, and I hope you don't mind me doing this, Amy, I'm just trying to.
Go for it.
You know, her costs are going to increase year over year by about $500,000. Now, a good chunk, almost all that increase is because of the new medical contract going from $1 million to $1.7 million. Can't avoid that. And she was able to right size in a couple of places, but again, all of those empty slots are figured in her budget. So if you remember back when we were talking about revenue, and she had to balance her budget with more than $3 million in reserve, she has to do that because we legally have to balance our budget. But her expenses, pretty assuredly, are not going to be $9,563,000 in change, because we're not going to be able to fill those slots, and so she won't be spending that money. But again, she has to budget just in case and show that she would fill all those slots. And everything I've said is accurate, right? So is everybody with me on that? It looks bad on paper, but the reality is she's not going to spend this much money. It's happened this year. She is well under her number for salaries this year because of inability to fill slots, tough time hiring people. So I wanted to say that off the bat, because I know that when you saw that initial indication that we were really going to have to pull some money out of reserve to meet her budget, it's not as bad as that. So, Amy, if you want to go down through your line items after that little preamble, go for it.
Amy, when was the last time you was fully staffed? Never?
Never, yeah. It's, I talked to Department of Corrections, the director, earlier this week, and she said that their staffing is so low at the prisons, they have over a 60% vacancy. They're busing parole officers in to man the prisons on mandatory overtime. So it's everywhere.
I'll also say this, you know, as you can look down through the line items yourself, again, the two big ones are medical, and she has made a plan for giving raises to her current team. Actually, Amy brought 3 plans, all a little different. This one that I had plugged in is the most expensive. It was called Shift 16 in her notation. And if you want to describe what that means, we can go into the other 2 after that. So what was your thought on Shift 16?
It was to increase the starting pay. We're losing people left and right, the ones that are at the facility. It's a stressful job. I think there's a billboard out on the strip. Tyson's, their starting pay is more than ours. Walmart's starting pay is more than ours. Davis County Jail, we increased our starting pay, so we were equivalent with theirs. They raised their starting pay again. If we don't increase our starting pay and get some people in that want to learn the trade and they want to stick with it, I mean, there's no one to replace us. And we need people that we can train and mentor, and they'll be the leaders of tomorrow. I'd like to increase the starting pay and do a probationary increase. Brenda doesn't throw anything at me. Once they pass their probation period, which I don't know if you remember back when we used to do it, it gives people something to look forward to. And if you're 5 months in and you're frustrated because you've had a horrible 3 days in a row, but you can stick it out for 30 more days and get that $1 more, it does make a difference. Every one of the raises or the proposals that I submitted focused on the shifts. It did.
The frontline shift workers. Yeah.
It didn't cut anyone out of a pay increase, but it focused on the shift. And I think everyone's learned the hard way that if we don't have employees on our shifts, we're running it. That's all there is.
Yeah.
I'm too old for 19-hour days, 18-hour days, way too old. Oh, yeah. So, we paid off the jail bond. Is that
Yep.
3 bonds we've paid off since 17?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes,
we've paid
ma'am.
all of them off.
Yep.
I've cut in every area I could cut without, jeopardizing anything. We reduced expenditures last year, and we're still under budget for this year, even with the HVAC units that have been replaced, COVID. The staff's done an amazing job.
And again, this plan was the most expensive. The other two, one was $110,000 less in salaries, and the other's about $120,000.
On the part-time employees, one of the part-time employees is the SAP director. The SAP director is the mental health provider for the jail. The company will only use him 16 hours a week, and we'll use him 24 hours a week. And he also meets the criteria to be the clinician for the program, so we don't have to contract with anyone else.
Yeah. Can you explain briefly the difference between the three? Again, I picked the most expensive one because it's easier to do that and work down than opposite. You had one called percent.
Yes, it was just a flat percentage increase across the board, and it was 4%, I think is what I had on there.
And then you had one called Pandemic 15.
Yeah. It was for anyone that stuck it out with us through the pandemic to bump their pay up. We would have no one making under $15 an hour, and then do a percentage increase across the board.
And then this is called Shift 16, which is shifts, concentrating on shifts, and we
We're
got 16.
concentrating on the shifts. Either start 15, 15, 50, and then after the 6 months probation, increase it up to $16 an hour. We'll have to make a couple of pay adjustments, and if you'll notice, it's not on here, the pay range and the
Yeah.
number of employees. The positions that were never filled, I did not include those on there, so I actually budgeted for less than the normally approved 100 full-time and 3 part-time. I budgeted for 88 and 3. Or 87,
88, yeah.
87 and 3.
Now, Shift 16, is that, it's the one I plugged in here, but is that your preference?
That is my preference.
Okay.
And that's allowing a full complement. We're basing this on a full complement.
Yes.
And I know that we've talked with the jail committee about bringing a proposal before the end of this fiscal year to perhaps increase salaries. The question I have is, and I know you've already kind of spelled out what you're going to propose, and we'll be, that will happen at the next fiscal court meeting for review. How does that compare to Shift 16, and will it take the place of new salaries in the new year? So if we pass something the last couple months of this year, it will just carry over that way into the new year, or is there going to be a difference between what you're asking for next fiscal court meeting, and then the new year? And I'm not saying that to be argumentative or anything.
No, I know
I'd
what
like to
you're
know, if we're willing to do it in July 1, we might as well do it May 1. You know what I mean?
And I hate to cause more work for
And she's
the
looking at me
treasurer's
like-
office. And, yes, I'm sorry. But if we could do I don't know if you have the formulas, I don't know the papers that you all have. If you could do the pay increase, that's the actual dollar figure for the employees, and raise the starting pay, and not start the percentage increase until July 1. I mean,
So we could split this
Yes.
with the initial cash increase and then apply the percentage for the new fiscal year, and it's kind of half one.
So we need to go ahead and approve that at our next meeting then.
Yeah, I mean, if that's that sounds acceptable. I mean, I think we've all agreed that to help solve this problem of staffing, we got to do something sooner than later.
I think you've got to do it. I mean, we're competing with people drawing that extra $300 a week plus the unemployment, and they, you know, why should they work?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Deputies and matrons line items were under 60% right now.
I hate to be the bad guy here, but we just didn't do that for the sheriff's department. And I feel like we don't need to do it here either till July.
If we don't do something and we lose very many more, I've already had to contact jails to figure out where we're going to house people.
You just lost 7, didn't you, Amy? Was there about
Then we
7?
lost a new hire that left the supervisor out in the cell and ran up the hall and left.
The other difference here, Tim, I think, is the jail pays its own way. It's their budget. And I'm all for whatever.
And we waited until budget time here to do it. And that's what we're doing. So.
Well, I agree, but if we do it in May, budget don't come in effect till July.
If I'm not mistaken, and I know what you're saying, I appreciate that. One thing to think about is you need how many people to run a shift? 7 minimum?
That's without the CSC, without the work dorm. It's a minimum of 7 people.
And you've got a couple now that are in danger of falling below that?
14 people total for all 3 shifts, wasn't that right?
And when you get,
Everyone.
if that consistently happens, you have the danger of those prisoners being pulled from you because you can't properly watch them, right? And that
Then we lose
sinks the
money.
revenue.
Then we lose money.
Yeah.
That, and it jeopardizes the officers. It's the safety of the officers. If you have one person working the floor because everyone else is working booking, working the tower, somewhere else, working medical, we had 3 inmates the other night to the hospital. Every one of those inmates, one guy went out twice, but every one of those took 2 people.
And if you've ever seen videos of an inmate attacking a guard, especially one by themselves, and it takes too long to get a second person in there, it can be deadly. Just a fact. So I know what you're saying. I think this is getting to be a crisis. And selfishly, we're lucky, we rely on our jail to pay its way, and it has. Very few counties in the state can say that. If we get to where we have to subsidize our jail, because that will be hugely expensive, and anything we can do within Amy's budget to not only keep her staff safe, but to keep the jail, from becoming a huge burden on the general fund, I think we should do.
And if the
There's that
state's getting ready
consideration.
to possibly send us 200 more prisoners,
Yeah.
we got to have more staff.
Right.
You've got to have it.
need that money.
So what I would propose then, in this context, is we listen to the proposal next fiscal court meeting. And as you said, Amy, we make it a hybrid of beginning the process of raises this fiscal year and then, adding the next part in July. So we aren't passing something completely different in July than we're about to hopefully be passing in May. Does that make sense? So we pick a plan, and it looks like shift 16. Would that be the plan? It's
the one that I prefer.
Okay,
I think
so
it
it's
would be most
a
beneficial.
dollar amount that we'd be thinking about right now, and then according to shift 16, a percentage raise next fiscal year.
Yes.
Is that right? Does everybody understand that anyway?
So it's like a flat raise here, and then 4% in July, is that
It
what we're
would be a
talking about?
percentage increase in July.
Okay. One of the things that you said that an incentive down the road to stay, I get that. And I would like for us to look at some type of 401K, something with where they're gonna be vested, and make it where it's, if you leave, you're gonna lose some dollars. They don't get that money until they've been there 4, 5 years, 6 years.
We
And
had
then-
that before, and it was 5 years, and I liked it too. I agree with you.
I know it's not cheap, But
Well, and I'll say, I like the idea too. That expense is not anticipated in this budget.
Right.
But I'd love to have that conversation. Now, I've heard from more than one department head that 401K match is great, but it doesn't get them in the door. You know, and what we need to do is get some people in the door. And if you're 23, that
Yeah, they don't
401K
think
isn't
that.
necessarily going to light you up, but.
And you got to educate them, and then
Yeah.
you're exactly right. A
But-
23-year-old thinks,
Yeah.
nah.
We used to have a program that if they were going to school and they made a certain GPA, then the county would help pay for those classes. A lot of people, the majority of them live paycheck to paycheck, so 401K, someone 22 years old, 23 years old isn't.
One thing we can also think about, which accomplishes the same thing, is getting back into the practice of creating a match for those who entered the deferred comp program.
Yeah.
We used to offer some like 3%, 2%.
Right.
It's the same benefit, really. But they'd have to go through the process of signing up for it. It wouldn't be, we would just hand it to them. They'd have to show some initiative that they wanted it. And sometimes you have to be about 30 years old with a family before you start seeing the value of that. But we eliminated that match 6 years ago when the county began to suffer and had to pull that. But if I'm not mistaken, that's about the time frame.
Yes, and there were some IRS regulations that were involved, and that was primarily why they had to drop it at that time.
I wonder if it's still an option.
There were some legal issues
There's-
through Kentucky Deferred Comp.
Yes.
It wasn't as much that the county dropped it, they kind of dropped us. I think.
More or less
I think we were
because-
the last county that was doing any sort of match like that. So there may be some issues there.
If you want us to continue to explore options in that regard, I can. It would be a pretty decent expense that we'd have, if we wanted to do it in this budget, we'd have to come up with the money somewhere. But if you want to spend the next year kind of see how this goes, see if that impacts our hiring in a positive way. And if through our experience, we see that some sort of additional benefit like that would work, I'd be all for it.
Well, it's not, I know you need hiring. I know you gotta get them in the door. But she's having trouble keeping them there once they get there too. And the sheriff's department's having the same problem. They're not.
I think the
not-
sheriff's having better experience than Amy is.
Oh, absolutely, but it's still there. It's
Well, and we've worked with Amy. Amy and I have talked about, doing things that don't involve money necessarily to help, better training. And I know that's tough because you have fewer people to train, trying to pat them on the back as much as you can. But if you're making $13 an hour and somebody throws feces on you, having a 401K plan does not make a difference. You either put up with that or you don't. That's the challenge. It's a tough job.
You've ever been hit with some tuna fish mixed with urine, it's always really pleasant.
And I don't mean to be flippant about the value of retirement plans, because Lord knows I'm invested in, but if I was that age, making that wage, I'm not even thinking about retirement yet. I'm thinking about, do I even like the job?
right. I get it.
Yeah,
And
but-
you have people that will start at the jail because it's $14 an hour. And then they'll see that they can go to, they may live in Sturgis, but they can go up to Toyota and they can start out at $16 an hour. Well, they're not thinking about the drive and everything else back and forth. They think
Yeah,
they
and
see
just to
those-
add to that, Century's hiring, they hiring
Yep.
at 25.
I
You
lost
know,
one to there.
and then about,
That-
We
then they go
lost
to
one.
27 something, yeah.
That whole
It-
tuna fish urine thing doesn't happen at Toyota.
No.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty certain.
We lost one to there, we've lost, what, 3 to pest control companies.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a challenge. I think we need to be creative in any way we can. Is it okay for now if we, just begin to think about that and see how this goes? Because, a 401K spread across all of our departments would not be inexpensive.
No,
think-
it's, I agree, it's not.
I think you're onto something, though, that part of the thing is generationally, there are differences. So on one hand, you're starting to see a lot of things coming out saying that the younger generation right now is actually better at saving than a lot of our generations. But they also generally, as a generation, don't look as much for a career. they anticipate changes in job, the gig economy type thing. So I think the challenge for us across all of our departments is to lay out a career path where somebody can envision themselves being there long-term, rather than saying, hey, this is a temporary stop. And that's a challenge just because of the way, that generation is thinking about it. They tend to be savers, but they also tend to be movers.
Would it also maybe be a possibility to have something like the Dave Ramsey course, not only for your staff, but for the inmates, to help them when they get out of jail, so they can, instead of this cycle back into the jail because they can't manage their money, they can't, they just, Steve can tell you what it costs to write a bad check, and it's just.
We do a financial management class,
Okay.
and it's certified through the state, and it's for the inmates that are in the program.
It sounds like some of the employees could use it too, to get their long-term planning.
So let's do this with the good permission of the court. For Amy's budget for 2022, can we recalculate with the idea that the court will be amenable to the request you're going to make for next fiscal court, meaning that your budget for 2022 would be limited to the 4% raise, the second half of that formula that you came up with. So that will change your salary line items and with the court, so it will only drop this new fiscal year line item, the total will drop. Of course, this fiscal year's will go up. But if you're okay with us, bringing that back for first reading of this budget, if we all approve with Amy just doing that, I think that'd be the easiest way to go. Now, that assumes the fiscal court passes what you're about to propose, but I think I hear a lot of support in the room.
And she's already got enough money in her budget for this year to cover it.
Oh, by far.
That's not going to be a
No,
problem.
no, they've only spent half their salary line item,
So we're
half
we're
of it.
okay.
So. Yes, Paul,
If you wait to vote on that next Tuesday, it will not show up on their paycheck until May the 27th because of the pay period.
I think we need I understand because of the nature of the salary schedule, the pay schedule. I think we need a full vetting, though. I don't think we should rush that. I think we should look at it and make sure. I'm sorry, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I think it's the fastest we can go. I may be wrong, you may disagree, but
And just say if this will put anybody outside those previously approved pay
Yeah.
ranges
Yeah.
in those positions, maybe a good time to go ahead and update those
Yeah.
salary ranges as well.
They're on the one that I sent.
yeah.
Okay, so that does include the new ones, so
Yeah.
that may be something at the next fiscal
Yeah.
court meeting when we do that, to go ahead and adopt that.
Just go ahead, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, and
So
we
when-
can
When you come in,
start it that day.
And anybody you're getting ready to hire, at least you can tell them, hey, we're going
Yeah.
to work this thing out.
Yeah.
So.
Paula,
You're
did I just hear you say
increasing this-
backdate it?
Well, the employee will not see it until
Right.
the 27th check, but we could backdate it to May or to the 20, or Monday, the 25th,
Yeah.
or whatever that was.
We
That
try
does
not
sound
to-
right.
Yeah, try not to start it in the middle of a pay period to cause even more heartburn for them.
I just heard y'all say as of the first of May,
Yeah.
that's why I was telling you about the pay.
I just pulled that date out of my,
and you're gonna increase the starting pay or across the board
It would be a starting pay increase, but then there would be a pay increase.
in July? Okay.
Yeah. So it'll make, some of the people still make $14 an hour, so that will it'll increase that. And then we have to do some pay adjustments, and that's what's figured in there.
okay. How's that sound?
I think it's good.
Okay.
I can live with
Yeah,
it.
I'm good.
Okay. And we're settling this budget, as far as I can tell, everybody's been amenable so far, pretty quickly. We have until June 30th to pass this budget, so we can see how this is going to work. The first fiscal court meeting in May, we digest it, have a vote, and then based on that, come back to this budget to vote on, second meeting in May, and then, have all of June to make the second reading and get it done. So there's plenty of time here to walk through this with the jail budget.
I can plug in the numbers
Yeah.
and just leave it at a percentage on this so you can see what the difference will be. That helps.
That'd be great. Any other questions of Amy? Anybody? Got it? Thank you.
Thanks.
That is it. That is what I've got. And I'm open for discussion. I think it's a good budget. I think it keeps us in line with what we need to think about with pensions coming up. To Keith Berry, who's watching out there, I forgot to call him. He's been watching on Facebook. I forgot to call him. But you know,
Wow.
Keith, you get that second COVID shot, sometimes you miss out on stuff.
You'll feel better tomorrow.
I did not see any comments on Facebook. when I
Okay,
was
good.
looking at
So
it.
I'll-
He didn't
If-
say.
With all your permissions, Keith was watching. He told me he was watching, but I'll give him a briefing on the.
Judge,
Talk
are we going to have a second meeting on the budget, or is it,
Here, unless anybody disagrees, I think we can handle the slight tweaks within the course of a normal budget, normal fiscal court meeting. But I'll leave it up to you to decide if we need a second meeting, a second workshop.
yes, that's what I'm referring to.
Does
second
anybody feel like we need a second workshop?
I don't think so, but I think
I'm
we can
good,
always
Judge,
do that.
if you're asking for a vote.
I think
good.
the couple strings we need to tie can be handled in the normal fiscal court meeting. Because basically they're Amy's salaries, is that right? I think I didn't hear anything else other than that.
Well,
Everybody
we'll
good?
have to answer the question that the coroner raised as well.
About,
That
3.3.
3.3%.
I think he said he wasn't interested in doing anything else other than the magistrates. That-
He basically said if y'all aren't going to take it, he's not
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. So,
Sorry, Bruce.
Nothing,
No,
you
we're-
did nothing.
Watch yourself, money.
Beth's ready to go. Anybody else have anything about the budget? It's a workshop, so I don't think I need a motion. Maybe I do, because it's part of a special session. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Beth seconded. Beth Moran for the motion. I'll give it to Butch for the second. All those in favor can leave. Thank you very much.